So AV team, I'm interpreting a message that I just received that we are now live. Is that correct?
That's what it looks like to me. Looks like that to me. So, okay. It looks like, give me 1 second and we'll get everything called, get the meeting going. Courtney, are you good? You're hearing everything? Looks like we're good to go.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. And welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us, Cabinet and Dr. McDaniel and board members. I believe we have everybody. I don't see Gloria. Is that the only one I'm missing?
I agree.
Okay. Okay. I think she might join us later, but that does give us quorum, so we can go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'll have Craig please call roll.
Paula Lewis.
Present.
Charles Henry. Mr. Henry.
He was here.
It would
Can we
appear
go to
that
the next one in case he got kicked off and he can come back on?
Okay. Rebecca Budd.
Here.
Carrie Jacobs.
Here.
Mark Mann.
Present.
Ruth Fields.
Here.
Gloria Perez. Meg McElhaney.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Henry.
Let's give it a few minutes to see if he can get back on. Somebody want to reach out to him, Craig, via text. I don't want to get started with the superintendent. Well, we got to go ahead and adopt the agenda if we want to do that. I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Call for the vote.
Paula Lewis.
Yes.
Rebecca Budd.
Yes.
Carrie Jacobs.
Yes.
Mark Mann.
Yes.
Ruth Fields.
Yes.
Meg McElhaney.
Yes.
Having received 6 aye votes and 0 nay votes, the motion carries as made. I did receive a text from Mr. Henry. It says that his computer froze. I'm assuming he's rebooting to come back in.
Okay. We could move, let's save the superintendent's report. Let's go ahead and go to Carrie. You want to hit policy real quick while we're waiting?
Sure. I sent out a report, minutes of everything that we had talked about. Staff was really helpful. And just to remind everyone, we're going through all the F policies, which are the student center policies. So we're, right now we've kicked a few things back to administration. We're still waiting. There are a lot of things that they're working on for attendance and online instruction. So we're waiting on, all of that to move forward on the policy end of it. But you'll see that F29 was a carryover from our last meeting before COVID. And we're kind of picking back up there. And then the other policy that we have today is just a duplicate of the uniform policy. Their F22 and F32 are the same one. So we're just bringing up F32 because it's the number is larger to not have to renumber very many policies. So, but everything else is in the minutes that Craig sent out to everybody.
Okay, does anybody have any comments or questions on that? I'd just like to say thank you for such a detailed report. That was awesome, Carrie. I appreciate it.
I do, Carrie, and I did under the law enforcement and schools part of it. And I know that you all talked about giving more detail on when a police officer should be involved in this. And I totally agree 100% with that. That is one of the things that, although we do have a code of conduct, it has been my experience even prior to my coming on the school board and even since, is that sometimes it doesn't seem to be interpreted across the board with administrators across the schools. So I think that it is vitally important that we are able to spell that out.
Yes.
Really and truly, even with law enforcement, that it has to be a criminal matter in order for them to become involved. I know that at one point we were doing disorderly conducts from children that were talking back or whatever, and those are the kinds of things that I would like to see as far as making sure that we are across the board. I know that before Gloria had mentioned about culture, a couple of about or so ago about culture. And so anyway, understanding even with that, what is, what is out of hand and out of control versus a cultural thing. So anyway, just wanted to mention that on that particular area. And again, to where that we're making sure that we're spelling this out across the board. Now, and I know that there was a report as far as how many this past year, how many police involved incidents that we've had. And so, Carrie, can you share,
Mhm. Yeah, we had talked about, and we had visited with Assistant Superintendent Brown about that. And our concern was that, in some schools, certain things might escalate to an arrest or contact with law enforcement, or in some schools, maybe it's going to be different. And that's exactly what we were talking about, is what you just mentioned, is saying, these are the things that will result in police in contacting law enforcement, and not just for this, to eliminate the possibility of inequitable treatment, but also, in some schools, we're not going to worry about that. That's going to fall under a code of conduct. And in some schools, it's no, that results in arrest. And so we wanted it, and it might be in student discipline, but it might be in the law enforcement schools policy, or it might be in both, where it's very specifically outlined that these certain actions.
Well, and also I'd like to add, as far as in that context as well, even the age appropriate. I don't know if you and Paula were on board at that time, but I had a parent of a kindergartner, to where that child was put in handcuffs and that was taken to Midwest City. Mom, 5-year-old kid.
No.
Mom
Okay.
couldn't leave her job in order to come. And so anyway, they gave her a big citation. And at that time, Aurora Laura was, and I did talk to her about intervening, to where that in certain schools or whatever, that might have been seen as a kid just throwing a temper tantrum, where that this child 5 years old was being criminalized. So definitely make sure about those kinds of incidents.
And that was something that that Jason Brown visited with us about that there are some things that result in citations, some things that result in arrest, and then going through a juvenile justice type of situation downtown, that kind of thing. Because citations are no small thing for families. Right. So yeah, those I think, and he can speak more to that, but that's something the district is talking with our law enforcement partners about, spreading that data out and finding exactly what's happening where, and what's an arrest that would result going downtown versus an arrest that would result in a citation, and what are the trends and that kind of thing. So they're looking at that stuff, but our concern was what is the function of law enforcement in our school, and how is it being leveraged, and is it being leveraged fairly? So yes,
again, the age appropriate, because when we are talking about trauma amongst our children and in the school, can you imagine a kindergartner having that experience?
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. Okay. And so anyway, to even the age appropriate, as far as even if we have an officer to intervene, why, first and foremost with the kindergartner. But anyway, beyond the point of that, I'm not here to say what or whatever, but I'm saying that even how, the approach of dealing with such situations. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Okay. Am I missing Mr. Henry? Is he back on?
No, Madam Chair, I received a text from him. He's trying to get back in. He's resorted to, I think, rebooting his computer to try to get it to work right.
All right, then let's continue with committee. Rebecca. Thank you for your report as well that you sent out.
All right, so I'll try to keep this short. We passed our policy, our new charter policy, at the last board meeting. As I mentioned in my report, our task force work is not done. And if there's any board members who would like to join or participate in what we are still working on, please let me know. We are happy to have more input. More voices are always better. It's going to be a really busy time from now until September. As a result of passing the policy, we now have to, or the administration Dr. McDaniel and his team need to write up a renewal application, a regulation to go with how the policies are going to be implemented. And just to remind everybody, we will be including the charter leaders and getting their input in the regulation. And we're also developing a new annual performance report, which will include performance frameworks on governance, operations, academics, and finance. So that's going to be really busy. And the middle of September is a big deadline, is because we have 4 charter schools coming up for renewal. As a reminder, for the policy, we have the option of non-renewing or renewing for a length of time, anytime between 1 and 5 years. And the September meeting is when by law, we have to, as a board, decide what we're going to be extending. If we are not going to be extending any, a non-renewal, they have to be notified by October 1st. So if you have any questions on that, I know it's kind of complex, but we really want to work this year on not being last minute with our charters. It was hard on them to be waiting at the last minute for contracts. And then I just have one other thing, which is I want to honor Tracy McDaniel. He is the longtime leader of KIP OKC, which is one of our longest running charters. People don't remember, but I guess, I don't know what year it was, but the then superintendent went to Tracy and asked him to go through KIP training and to start a KIP school for OKCPS. And KIP OKC actually started as an enterprise school founded by Tracy and his founding board. It eventually became a charter school, and he has led it for 19 years, and he's retiring June 30th.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's a big deal. You know, he's a lifelong supporter of quality education. And if you've ever talked to him, it's about quality schools and quality teachers, especially for children of color. You know, just some of his accomplishments. He was the State of the Year Vice Principal in 2000. He's in the Langston University Hall of Fame for Education. He was an OKCPS Teacher of the Year in 1995, one of our own. University of Central Oklahoma Excellent Educator Award. KIP OKC has received many national awards. And if you know anything about Tracy, you know he's devoted his life to the kids at KIP. So I just wanted to wish him well in retirement. His replacement has been named. It's a woman named Kendall Greer. She's coming from Uplift Education in Dallas. She has an excellent reputation, and I wish Tracy well in his retirement.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Rebecca.
I would like to add to that, as far as with Tracy, is that yes, and not only Tracy, but KIP as a whole, and that you did mention that they are a nationally known charter school. And so again, that's where that when you hear me constantly talking about these are our children, these are our charters. And so anyway, making sure that we treat them in a partnership way because of the products that they bring out for our children, that is definitely worth talking about. The new leader, is my understanding, she's also she is a KIPster. She also went to KIP as well. And so, you know, that was one of the groups when I first got on board, and when we were talking about policy and the I-28 and talking about helping to improve our schools in our district. And we had talked about even partnering with others, charters and schools such as KIP. KIP was one of the ones that we had talked about. So again, congratulations to Tracy for the many years, and you know, kudos to them. And I'm looking forward to even greater things happening. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so anybody have any other comments for charters other than thank you for the work, Rebecca?
Madam Chair, just an update.
Yes.
I did receive a text from Mr. Henry, and he is still having difficulties. I have reached out to our IT staff and asked them to reach out to him to resolve the issue.
Is there a way that he could call in and at least be on voice while he's trying to update his thing so that he could, is that a legal thing? Can he do that?
I'm trying to remember the specifics on the law, Miss Cheryl.
Call in, but I would definitely want to make sure he's on video before there's a vote, but he could listen that way or through the live stream until he gets in. But we do need to try to get him back onto the meeting.
Okay. So maybe Craig, see if he can at least go to YouTube and watch the live stream. And then if he has a question, he could, or a comment, just save them towards the end when he gets back on and we can go back and look at those. Maybe, does that sound doable to everybody?
Let me ask you a question. I know that we have the option because when we first got started, I was having problems with us actually being able to join in. And I know that we're given the option of either to come in just as we are now or to call in. So, and I want a legal opinion about if I have to call in because I have a computer problem. Are we saying that I would not be able to vote on, although I am engaged as far as a part of the telephone part of it? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, so the way that the law, the way they implemented it for, COVID-19 reasons, you have to say on your agenda whether board members are entering the meeting either in person, on the telephone, or by video. And so Craig has kind of sent out his poll asking for one of those options, but you can only switch from video to in person. So I think that's something that we need to figure out if the video is causing an issue. You can certainly turn your video off while you're in the meeting. However, we put on the agenda that you're going to video conference in. So
That
it's
makes
meant
sense.
for the public to be able to see you. But I think if you said you wanted to teleconference in, then you could call in as long as it's on the agenda that way, you'd be able to participate over the phone instead of by video. But we just have to put it on the agenda.
Okay. All right. Well, I would kind of still like to just move on to maybe special business then. 6.01, approve revisions to the OK CPS board policy F29, student recruitment, access to students and directory information. This was on information a month ago. Is there a motion?
I motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call for the vote?
Paula Lewis,
Yes.
Rebecca Budd,
Yes.
Carrie Jacobs,
Yes.
Mark Mann,
Yes.
Ruth Fields,
Yes.
Meg McElhaney.
Yes.
Having received 6 aye votes, 0 nay votes, the motion carries as made.
Thank you. 6.02 is approve the deletion of a duplicate OK CPS board policy F32 student uniform. It's my understanding there's no change. The uniform policy,
Correct.
it's literally a deletion of it. So is there a motion?
Madam
I
Chair,
motion delete.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, point of order. Ms. Cheryl, so this is the first reading of this. Does this require a second reading?
On policy F32,
Right, deletion of F32. The question is, does this require a second reading like revisions or new policies?
no, actually, I looked at the policy on board policies, so it's B09. B09 provides for a process through which you have a first and second reading for revised or new policies, but it does not have that process for deletion of a policy. Further, it's procedural and it doesn't substantively change anything because this policy already is in place. It's simply a duplicate. We're just trying to clean it up. I don't think it requires a second reading.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption. And the first motion was made by
Me.
Ms. Budd.
I motion to
Second.
delete the uniform policy.
Second.
Second by
Ruth,
Ms.
yeah, Ruth is the second.
Okay.
Is there discussion? Call for the vote.
Paula Lewis,
Yes.
Rebecca Budd,
Yes.
Carrie Jacobs,
Yes.
Mark Mann,
Yes.
Ruth Fields,
Yes.
Meg McElhaney.
Yes.
Having received 6 aye votes, 0 nay votes, the motion carries as made.
I'm sorry. My kind of a slight yes kind of came in because a thought just came to my head.
Yes.
And it's dealing with the uniform policy. And Carrie, I don't know if this may be with you, I don't know. But as we are going into the new way of doing things, the online classes and all, do you all think that it might be necessary, to have, because maybe a kid is in their pajamas all day,
That's a really good point, Ruth.
I have to have those kinds of conversations. And so we can talk about it later, but that's just something, Carrie, that I can reach out for us even to say if we're going to have.
Thanks for bringing that up. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so-
we didn't talk about that as a committee, but that's a really good point. So next, we're going to talk about online learning and attendance and that kind of stuff. So that's a good thing for us to address in July, because if the kids are like me, they're still wearing pajama pants after lunch.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. That brings us to 6.03, approve lease agreement with John Rex Charter School. Is there a motion?
I motion to approve the lease with John Rex Charter School.
Second.
Second, Mark is the second. Is there any discussion? Call for the vote?
Paula Lewis,
Yes.
Rebecca Budd,
Yes.
Carrie Jacobs,
Yes.
Mark Mann,
Yes.
Ruth Fields,
Yes.
Gloria Therese. I'm sorry, Meg McElhaney.
Yes.
Having received 6 aye votes, 0 nay votes, the motion carries as made.
6.04 is approved charter contract with John Rex Charter School. I'll make the motion for that to approve the contract with John Rex Charter School. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Call for the vote?
Paula Lewis,
Yes.
Rebecca Budd,
Yes.
Carrie Jacobs,
Yes.
Mark Mann,
Yes.
Ruth Fields,
Yes.
Meg McElhaney.
Yes.
Having received 6 aye votes, 0 nay votes, the motion carries as made.
Craig, have you heard anything from Mr. Henry or Eric?
No, the last thing I heard is that we have an IT staff member that is calling him to try to help resolve the issue.
Okay, all right. Let's go to consent agenda. Is there a member who desires to pull any of the items for discussion only or to be voted on separately? Okay,
I
is
move
there-
approval of consent agenda.
I
Is there a
second.
second? Ruth's the second, okay. All right, call for the vote?
Paula Lewis,
Yes.
Rebecca Budd,
Yes.
Carrie Jacobs,
Yes.
Mark Mann,
Yes.
Ruth Fields,
Yes.
Meg McElhaney.
Yes.
Having received 6 aye votes, 0 nay votes, motion carries as made.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and move to the superintendent's update. I was trying to kind of slow that down, but I know we have the public that's really wanting to hear plans for the fall school. So I do feel like for the public, we need to move forward on this. There won't be any action items on it, but I am gonna turn the floor over to Dr. McDaniel. Just to clarify though, we are good on live stream, right, everybody? I don't want to make Dr. McDaniel start over for the 3rd or 4th time today. So we're good to go?
Yes. Live stream is good to go.
All right. It's all yours, Dr. McDaniel.
Okay, sorry, I was having some technical difficulties. Thank you, Chair Lewis, for turning it over to me for a little bit. I appreciate your leadership and have a lot of very important things to talk about. 2 significant presentations where we want to engage the board in a conversation, one about P2G and provide an update. And it will be based upon how we're looking at starting the school year in the 2021 school year. The second presentation, Deputy Superintendent Jason Brown will lead the conversation, and we're entitling it Back to School. And so he's going to give you some best thinking surrounding what it looks like, what our options might be as we sit here at the end of June, looking forward to August 10th. Before we jump in there, I want to go through just a few things just by way of update for the board. First of all, I want to just celebrate some of the members of our educational community who have been doing marvelous work behind the scenes. And this would include our ESY program, which is our summer school for kids on IEPs, our special education version of summer school. We were able to serve 236 students. And this, as you recall, was a virtual attempt at summer school. A lot of challenges, but got some very impressive results and good feedback. Certainly not the equivalent of face-to-face, but we were able to accomplish some goals throughout the summer for our ESY kids. We also had about 120 of our teachers who committed to summer school. And so we were able to serve roughly 850 kids during 4 weeks of summer school. You may remember we made some subtle changes with summer school, so it wasn't just credit recovery. We offered opportunities for the full range of kids that we serve in our school system, and 850 kids took advantage of those 4 weeks. So our thanks to the teachers who committed to those 4 weeks of summer school. From a security standpoint, years ago, well before I stepped into the district, this board made a commitment to security and enhancing the security and safety of our students, faculty, staff, and visitors. So very happy to report that the camera systems at all secondary schools have been upgraded to our high definition cameras. You may remember, and you may have been some of them who had concerns about the quality of the pictures we were able to get through our camera systems. Very grainy, antiquated technology. And so we have upgraded all of our secondary schools to the high def systems. We have approximately 10 elementary schools that have also been updated as of today. And by the end of September, we will have all schools district-wide who have been updated with our security systems. So significant steps forward in that arena. You also may remember 2, 3, 4 years ago, there was a conversation about safety vestibules at our schools, and that it was too easy for people not a part of our school community to walk through the front doors and gain access into the hallways because there was not a safety vestibule. And so the commitment was that at every school, we would renovate and create safety vestibules at every school. So the update there is we have round one, we identified our highest need, highest priority, 10 schools, and those will be completed before school starts. The remainder of the schools that were identified will conclude next year. So it's a 2-year process, 10 by the time school starts in August, and the remainder by the time school starts 1 year from now. Moving along on Sunday.
Sean, may
Yes.
I ask you, since we're talking about the safety issue?
Yes, ma'am.
So at one point, at one of the schools, and Scott will be familiar with what I'm talking about. I remember Star Spencer at one point, to where that our PA systems throughout the schools were not working. So that was a very dangerous and place to be, to where that one could not report to another that there was, if it were an active shooter or whatever, and they were not able to communicate. Has that been something that has been addressed, or that's being addressed through the safety part of what we're doing?
So yes, Ms. Veals, the short answer is yes, that is being addressed. I need to get information back to you. It was more than just Star Spencer, although it was in the Star Spencer feeder pattern. There were a couple of schools affected.
Yeah, and and my whole thing is not just, I just know of that, for instance.
Yes,
but
ma'am.
my concern is the entire district.
Let me get information back to you ASAP on where we are. I know that it's being addressed, but I don't know tonight where we are in that process. So let me get information back to the full board regarding our progress with our PA systems. Thank you for that reminder. On June 21st, OKCPS was proud to host and co-sponsor an event called the Children's March for Justice. We were able to co-sponsor that with Oklahoma City Black Lives Matter and also our friends at Millwood Public Schools. If you were able to attend, I know many of you had that opportunity. You know that there were hundreds of people, students, faculty and staff, board members, community members who walked from FD Moon, which was the rallying point, over to Frederick Douglass Moses Miller High School on the Frederick Douglass campus. I was honored to be able to be among those who joined and listen directly to our kids and hear from them. It was student-led. One of our own, a young man by the name of Rodney Cox, who is an assistant principal at John Marshall, helped to facilitate, but make no mistake, this was planned and delivered by students from largely from Oklahoma City, but also from Middale, from Millwood, and I think a couple other school districts as well. And we were able to hear directly from them about their concerns. I thought it was a significant community event, and we were very pleased to be able to play a role in that.
Hey, Sean, Dr. McDaniel.
Yeah.
So go on that. The kids were very well spoken. They had their 4 clear ask of the district. Are we
Yes.
looking at a way to get them together as a group with perhaps you and, you know, whether it be Dr. Mouse, Dr. Polk, Taylor, Jason, just to let them have some like more recognition, not such a large thing, and really kind of give them the ideas, like give them the numbers. Because one of them was, you know, increased recruitment of Black and brown and indigenous teachers. But we're doing that, but maybe it'd be nice to give them the numbers. It just feels like maybe we should reach out to them.
Absolutely. And we have, matter of fact, today I received an email from one of the young ladies who helped to plan and deliver. One of the byproducts of this initiative is that in our school district next year, there will be formal clubs organized at many of our high schools, even down into the middle and elementary, where a sponsor will step up to create chapters of Black Lives Matter. So we will maintain communication with our students, with Rodney, who again, thankful that he is part of our staff in Oklahoma City Public Schools. And we will continue the conversation moving forward. Specifically, since you mentioned it, what they call the demands, I don't know if demands came out of the media or if that's actually what the kids called it, but what they wanted to talk about very clearly, number one is increase Indigenous, Brown, and Black teachers. We are involved in that as we speak. And so you're familiar with our diversity pipeline, our bilingual pipeline, where we are, as a foundation partner, we are paying for a bachelor's degree for any paraprofessional that works in our district who will commit to teaching with us. And so we've taken some significant steps. And I think what you're suggesting is right on target, that we share this information with our kids. The second one was an increase in curriculum opportunities about Indigenous, Black and Brown people. And so a reminder, and I know that you know this, but it's good to remind ourselves that we were the first district in Oklahoma to have a Black history curriculum approved as a world history course. And so we have taken steps. Now, we have clearly not arrived, and we need to do more. And I think the conversation with our students will be very productive, but I think it's going to be good for them to hear and to understand, hey, here's what we have done as a school district. Now, what else do we need to do? Number 3 was to remove the zero tolerance policy. This was a conversation or a request of the kids. In Oklahoma City Public Schools, and we know that on paper is different than operational many times. On paper, the only zero tolerance policies we have would be if there's a firearm involved, and that's per statute, or if there's serious bodily harm. Outside of that, on paper, we do not have zero tolerance policies. Now, what we have to do is line up our actions and how we operate with what the paper says. And we've got some work to do there. So again, we look forward to the conversation. And then number 4 from the kids was to have a conversation about the role of the school resource officer and whether or not it would make sense to replace SROs with counselors. And that was their 4th request. We have begun those conversations with local law enforcement, and we will include the voice of our community, particularly since we're talking about it, of our kids, and get their insights into what it looks like now and what they would like for it to look like. So those are the 4 requests / demands that were made at the 21st rally. And we were grateful for the chance to hear that.
If I can, Sean,
Yes, ma'am.
If I can chime in on that, as far as with the students and hearing their voices, I'm just going to bring us back that reminder because we still have not gotten there, and I have been screaming it, and I'm going to continue to scream, is to having student input in the student experience and equity committees. Those are the areas to where we definitely need to be able to engage them, also educate them as far as even the process of the education system. And so these are all system things that they have asked for. And so anyway, again, that when you all are talking to whoever that the adults are in this or whatever, I would strongly encourage that we ask and invite them. You know, we perhaps need to maybe to do some type of I know we have an adult application for those who are interested in being a part of the student experience and equity. But again, this is what I'm speaking of when I say that we need to hear their voice. We need to talk with rather than at. And so anyway, including them in that conversation. Another area you just mentioned as far as with the history courses that we offer and being the first, but I do remember the conversation, I guess maybe about a month and a half, 2 months or somewhere along the way ago, to where that it is kind of an optional thing. I think that what lots of voices are, in myself included, is more so not an option, but an intention for it to be, and I'm not sure how we do this. That's why we have the professionals on board to figure out how that we put this curriculum in our schools. And so that's a conversation I definitely would like to have administration to continue to, and not as an option, but as a, this is what, you know, what you do as curriculum. And so.
You bet. Thank you.
Question. Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry. As soon as the roll call came, my computer froze and I had to go to a different laptop. And so I went back to this laptop, but it's not locating my camera. So it won't allow me to be visible. But I would like to discuss that a little bit regarding the resource officers. I think that one thing that is happening is a lot of people are saying that we should get rid of our resource officers. But I think a lot of the conversation coming from a national level, particularly with the American Federation of Teachers, is they're not necessarily saying get rid of resource officers. They're saying that we should have fewer, and they're saying that we should have, in those communities of color, Black and brown communities, we need to have resource officers that look like them in those particular communities. And they use the word community oriented, which is a word I've been using. And so I talked to Carrie about that before. And so it's not saying we're trying to get rid of all the officers so we can put counselors in there, because that's not necessarily the solution. The solution is we have resource officers. We want to make sure that they're community oriented. A lot of times at an early age, the children, that law enforcement officer will be the only positive Black and brown person that they see that is a law enforcement officer. And so and I've heard stories about people saying how important that was to them growing up. So that's something that needs to be. So my suggestion is, because it comes from a lot of people outside Black and brown communities, but we need to talk to those parents in those communities about whether or not how they feel about resource officers, because a lot of parents will withdraw their kids from school. Some parents, the only reason they keep their kids in some of our schools is because of those resource officers. If you remember that video that came out last year about that mob, it's like if you're leaving that, and that was somebody from our security. But the point is that kids understand if there's no police officer in the building, and so that can create an extra problem. So we have all these people that don't live in Black and brown communities making decisions about whether or not these schools in Black and brown communities need to have police officers, but nobody's speaking with the parents and the people in those communities to see what advice they may have. And so that's a suggestion that I would make.
Good, thank you.
Charles, and chiming in on what you just said as far as making sure that we have Black and brown, that would be good. But I'm going to say, even from my own self-experience working in a police department, and where that we did employ school resource officers from that particular community, and that we did have Black in that. And so that did not alleviate the problem. So the main thing is having police officers, if we're going to have school resource officers, having them to where that they are community oriented. And so having those types of conversations more so, in my opinion, than just having Black and brown. Same as the difference in teachers and all. Yes, it is and administrators. It is a desire, and that it has been proven, but above all is making sure that we have the right ones that are in the schools over our children.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ms. Fields. Thank you, Mr. Henry. A few more things and we'll jump into presentations. Last month, I mentioned how grateful we were to our volunteer base. You may remember the $10.4 million mark impact that we were provided as a school district through volunteerism. And I wanted to just shout out to all those listening that July 1, we kick off our Reapply in July campaign. And so all those who are willing and able to volunteer for next year, you've got to go back through your annual registration. You can do that on our website, okcps.org. Get your information inputted, and then we'll get you lined up for volunteerism for next year. You know, we don't know what it's going to look like still, but what we do know is we're going to need volunteers. And so we appreciate all those who have helped us and those who have a heart for that moving forward. So hit our website, get your annual registration. It's very brief, and we'll get you lined up with volunteer work. Wanted to give you a couple numbers. Last year at this time, we still had about 180 teaching openings, 180 last year at this time. Right now, we have about 85 openings, and a large percentage of those are special education positions, but we've hit our boot camp hard. We've got close to 30 who have gone through the boot camp and are ready to work for Oklahoma City Public Schools. So big shout out to Brad and his team in HR and those who have supported him. We have cut our number about in half year over year. So great job, Brad and HR team. Summer meal program, incredible. Scott, if you would just, again, from all of us to your team, child nutrition team, thank them. We typically don't feed kids in July, but we're going to be able to feed kids through the month of July this year. It's going to be grab and go, and it will be very similar to the way you've seen it, where kids come through typically by car. We hand them what they need and they move on. But we've been able to extend it through the month of July, leading almost up to the start of school with very few days in between where we're not going to be offering meals. So 14 meal site locations this summer. I think in the past we've had 5 or 6. So great job from the SNS team. You remember that, oh gosh, as we were leading into last summer, the staff identified the big 5: equity work, Bond 2020, Embrace OKC, our strategic plan, Reboot, and then Pathway to Greatness and the updates on Pathway to Greatness, the implementation. What I want to just talk about as we lead into our presentation is the idea that all 5 of these initiatives, frameworks, they work off of one another. They complement one another. It's not like we have 5 standalone, siloed initiatives. And so as we work through these 5 things moving into the next year, what we've got to do a better job of, and we've talked about this as a staff, is connecting one initiative to the other initiatives. So an easy example would be our equity work. Our equity work is foundational to everything else that we do. We can't do P2G implementation well, we can't do strategic planning well, and so on, without a focus on equity. And so what we're going to really try and do a better job of with the board and with our community is tying this work together, because they all rely on each other for success. What I want to do right now is focus on 2 of those. I want to focus on our 5-year strategic plan, and I want to focus on Pathway to Greatness. You know, you've been a part of this board. We've been working since last fall on rebooting our 5-year plan known as the Great Commitment. We've done significant survey work. We met with small groups, parent groups, student groups, as we identified those most important things as we move forward with regard to what we want the district to look like next year, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. What are the hallmarks of Oklahoma City Public Schools? And so the survey shuts down on the 3rd. And so what I want to do is encourage anybody listening to, if you haven't yet, to go in and take the survey. Again, you can go to okcps.org, link to the survey, and add your voice to those important questions. What are important things to us? What do we want the district to look like, et cetera? It doesn't take very long at all, but your voice is important as we begin finalizing our next 5 years of strategic planning. Okay, I want to jump into Pathway to Greatness. And this is, Courtney, if you could cue that up, I'll continue talking and you guys can, and ladies can watch as we provide you with an updated version. You'll recognize this format. This is the one we used to report out in January. And so what we want to do is take a look at what 2021 will look like. And so next slide, this is our project visual. You remember that a year ago, moving into the summer, we had over 100 construction projects. We had 1,000 plus staff relocations. And just to add to that big 1,000 number, that was before we decided to move the FD Moon 5th grade over to Edwards. That was before we decided upon the OKCPS Early Childhood Center at Gatewood. And so through the year, that 1,000 staff relocation number has increased pretty significantly. So hats off to our operations crew who made those moves happen and are continuing to make those moves happen. All right, next slide. So here's our utilization chart. This was a big one as we began initially talking about the why. Why were we needing to reinvent? Well, we knew that a third or so of our schools collectively were empty. Yet we were running our district as though all of our buildings were full. So this past year, we increased to an 80% utilization. And we anticipate if we hit projections next year that we'll slip a little bit, but we'll be at about a 78% utilization. Now, keep in mind, this is with movement. So remember that we're moving some pre-K classes to Gatewood. Remember that we're moving a 5th grade from Moon over to Edwards. We're also taking in the Linwood Early Childhood Center into the district. So there's some balancing there. So while we slipped a little, we feel good about a 78% utilization if projections hold true. Next slide. Just a reminder kind of to center us on those 4 pillars that we believed were so important: the access to learning, better support for teachers, resources dedicated to students, and social supports for students as our 4 pillars that we want to connect P2G2. All of our trade ups should be connected very clearly to one or more of those pillars, okay? So a subtle change here that I want to point out to you. Each time I go around last year as we're implementing, many of our elementary teachers focused in on that second comment, which says now this year and next, all elementaries have 3 teacher teams at every grade, K4. Last year, it didn't say K4. And so what I was saying was that at every grade level, including pre-K is how this message was received, there would be 3 teacher teams. When the intent was, we're talking about K4. As we move pre-Ks to centers, we're taking 1, 2, maybe 3 classes from a particular school into a center. So it may be that a particular school did not have 3 teachers in its pre-K program. And so a little bit misleading on my part, and I apologize for that. So what I want to be clear moving forward is when we talk about 3 teacher teams, We are specifically talking about the K4 strand, and we're very pleased to be able to tell you that we intend to keep every team K4 at 3 or more. All right, next slide. And so this was our school size slot. Want to point out again, just full transparency here, as we move pre-Ks out and as we move a 5th grade out, that will most certainly impact school size in a particular building. Let me give you an example of one of the ways that we broadcast this last year, which again, I want to make sure we're accurate and that we're being very specific about what we're talking about here. If we move a pre-K building out of an elementary into a center, we could say that the pre-K through 4 is X as far as student population. They're on 2 campuses, but for that school system, let's take Wilson as an example. We had pre-K kids in one building. We had K through 4 in another building. The pre-K through 4 Wilson student population is X, even though they're at 2 different buildings. Well, the feedback we got is that's really smoke and mirrors. We want to know how many kids are in a particular building. So we want to be able to report that out moving forward. While we do have a continuum of Wilson kids, pre-K through 4, if they're in 2 different buildings, we want to call that out and make sure that we're saying exactly what we mean and exactly what parents are expecting. So look for that as we're moving forward, just a subtle shift in how we report numbers. Next slide, Courtney. Just again, a reminder of what things looked like pre-P2G, things all over the place. You remember that slide. Next one, we are able to line things up in consistent grade bands. And also, what's really not talked about enough is the consistency of feeder patterns. Equally, maybe even more important, is the idea that I can go to school with the same kids if I stay in the feeder pattern from pre-K all the way through graduation. And there is strength in that. We can learn about succession planning, in other words, moving from 4th grade into the 5th grade. What are the expectations in my feeder pattern? There's a pride that develops. There is camaraderie that develops, which research will tell us keeps kids in a school system. If I know the kids from year to year to year that I'm going to school with, if I'm a parent or grandparent or guardian and I know the parent, grandparent, guardian of the kids my kids are going to school with, I will stay in a feeder pattern. And so we're pleased to be able to offer that and continue that moving into 2021.
Sean,
Yes.
okay. With the Star Spencer as in high school, I think that's one of the things that I hadn't thought about until here recently, that I did have some families from the Star Spencer area talk about that Star Spencer being Star Spencer High School, rather than even looking at what we see here on screen, is that it is a mid-high, although we refer to it as Star Spencer High School. So I do remember before the COVID and all, well, then that had been been discussed, well, been brought to my attention for it to even to radiate to me for the first time. And even to the part of having their own identity. I'm saying the part, if it's a mid-high, it's a mid-high. It's no longer Rogers. Rogers is more so on a elementary type of a focus, if you will. And so, from 7 to 12, that's more into the mid-high type of
Yes.
focus. So, that's just something for us to have in mind as we're moving forward, because our yeah.
Great catch. And so we met as a team, as a cabinet, we met, oh guys, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. I think we met 3 times with students at Star Spencer. One of the questions or one of the concerns they brought to us, and I think we've talked a little bit about this, was exactly that, Ms. Veals. You're calling us Star Spencer High School. Our marquee says one thing, our letterhead says something different. When it's reported on the news, it's something even different. So what we arrived at was Star Spencer mid-high. And I apologize that was not updated. That's my fault on this slide. That will be updated. We'll get that done tomorrow. And we have communicated that back to the kids and the principal at Star Spencer, that it is a mid-high, and that's the way we'll refer to it moving forward. Thank you for that reminder. Okay, so here you see we've added the 2021 class size bar, and you'll see a bunch of question marks. We were able to bring the class size down and the range down from pre-P2G to first year of implementation. 2021, obviously that remains to be seen, but we'll track this and then we'll report back to you what the actual class size numbers are. Clearly our target every year in every school is to stabilize or maintain, worst case scenario, maintain class sizes on average. You know, we've had a lot of interesting things happen for the last 10 or so weeks. And so we've got to see what enrollment looks like. But our goal is to stabilize. If we can bring class sizes down, we will. But I think we all need to have an expectation that class sizes may increase. And I think that's an expectation year to year most districts do have. We have really made an effort through P2G not to let that happen. And so we will report back in the August, maybe September meeting, once we have a better idea of what class sizes truly look like. We didn't want to mislead and just put a projection number in there.
And I
Okay,
want to
Daniel,
jump
can
in.
I ask you, sorry,
Go on, Paula.
can I ask you a question about the top number, the 31, 33? What causes them? Are we out of space in a building? Is that why we have class sizes that creep up that high? Because in theory, if you had 3 classes at 31, feels like you could make a 4th class and we'd still have the money for that.
That's a great question. So if you look at 18, 19, that range, that tells a story about South Side and maybe the Northeast area of our school district. In the South Side, we did not have room. I mean, our schools were busting at the seams. And so as we crept up with a school population, we didn't necessarily have additional classes. Even though we could have afforded a teacher, we didn't have any room. And so you ended up with 34, 36, 38 kids in a class. Whereas in some other areas, I can think of 2 or 3 schools in the Northeast area where we had very low enrollment. And so you got to a student number in 3rd grade, let's say, where you had 32 kids. So you put 22 in one class, you had 10 left, and you either balanced it out or 10 kids were in a class. Or you may remember, I know, you know, this may not be a conversation we want to have, but we had the split classes. We had 54 split classes at one time. And so you did what you felt like you needed to do with regard to scheduling. But the easy answer is it was based upon staffing and student enrollment in different parts of the city. We saw a big change this past year because we made some boundary changes. And so our range shrunk and we were able to maintain our class size on average. Great question.
I just want to add to this, and this again is dealing with COVID, the unknown, and even what we're going to be facing as we move forward. But Sean, you will recall a couple of weeks ago that I had a teacher to reach out to me, and we were talking about even how will the numbers, you know, in our classrooms, and if we're talking about going in with the social distancing. And I kind of gave the scenario as I'm looking here on the screen and thought about, okay, if we have 15 in a classroom and that this particular person who's in the schools said that they did not feel that that would work. Hopefully, and I totally understand we have to have something to visually see, but I'm sure that you guys are looking at even these other scenarios, because again, is that yes, we plan for we hope for the best, and then we plan for the worst. And so I hope that as we're moving forward, we're also looking at, you know, the numbers if things happen in the way that it possibly could happen.
Yes, ma'am. I think you're going to be very pleased with the report that Deputy Superintendent Brown gives, because you're going to see a lot of that thinking that you're referencing in his report. So definitely. Okay, Courtney, next slide. So really great news. We were targeting moving into this past year. We were trying to hit 100% in full-time art, music, full-time librarians, assistant principals, and STEM maker spaces. We hit 3 of the 4 last year. Very happy to report that we were able to close the gap and that every single school will have a full-time school librarian. So you see the red circle showing that we went from 93%, closed the gap, added an additional FTE, and every elementary school will have full-time, every day, all year, those 4 things. So really pleased about that. Just a real quick subtle change here. You'll see that we added the A. If you'll back up one, Courtney, to STEAM centers. Our community, our district is very interested in the arts and has made a significant commitment to the arts. And so we wanted to add that into our logo for STEAM centers. All right, the next one, you've seen this before, but I wanted to just again publicly thank all of our STEAM center. We'll make that change as well at the top. Sponsors, just some cool pictures, tracking that information, tracking the number of hours our kids are spending, tracking progress, monitoring projects, and very excited about year 2 with our STEAM centers at our elementary schools. Another elementary trade up. Here is a fairly busy image that you've seen before. And if you look at the top right, I'll just call out a couple of these things. Pre-P2G US grant, and this is just one example, was right at 2,000 students. Last year, they settled in at just over 1,600. If our projections are accurate, they will drop again. And so in the rebound, the drawing of the boundaries, the boundary lines, the districts, we accomplished that goal. And we'll see where we land as we start the year this next year. Fields and futures, we've got a presentation that we'll
Superintendent,
Yes, sir.
can you go back to that one?
Yep.
On the successful application school programs increase.
Yes, sir.
Me personally, from what I'm hearing from the community at the school in the Northeast building and other application schools, is that there are selective admission schools and they are denying students that live across the street the opportunity to get a quality education at that particular school. I think it's imperative upon you to communicate with board members, all board members the same way. And I think that this is something that should be taken into consideration, because a lot of people are frustrated in regards to the fact that the application schools are working as selective admission schools, and they're predominantly white schools in a district that is predominantly Hispanic and predominantly black and brown children, but they don't have access to those schools. It's racially unjust. And I think that that's something that needs to be looked at, and it's not being looked into properly. And I just think that that's something that upon this school district that we need to serve all our kids and all our communities. And we should not have a school set up shop in a community where those kids in that community can't go to that school because they don't academically qualify.
Thank you for your input, Mr. Henry. While we're on this slide, let me talk a little bit about that enrollment. If you rewind back to one of the guiding principles that the board had established, it was to increase the number of seats in our successful application schools. At that time, our total enrollment in our application schools combined was right at 2,100. And so after 1 year moving into year 2, that 2,100 will be 3,800. And so we've almost doubled the number of application seats at our successful programs. And so that guiding principle that the board established, we're making good progress based upon the number of seats available. Okay, Courtney, next slide. And we're winding up, board. Just 2 or 3 more slides. On the left, you see that we made a commitment to full-time counselors at every elementary. We hit that moving into last year, and we expect to have at least one in every elementary school moving forward. Additionally, we have made an investment in crisis counselors at every middle school and additional counselors. And this is from our mental health Embrace OKC platform. We're going to add additional counselors at elementaries as well. So let's talk very quickly about Embrace OKC. You can read the bullets, but we are really beginning to get some traction. Marcia Heron, Dr. Heron has stepped into the role where she now oversees our mental health programming. And so we're excited that in the last couple of weeks, we've had 2 major organizations. One contributed $100,000 to Embrace OKC, and then just 2 or 3 days ago, OG and E contributed $50,000. And so we're able to leverage that for preventative program, educational opportunities, all the way to training for teachers and administrators, and on into treatment for kids. And so a lot more coming. And I know we say that from time to time, but we're really beginning to get some traction with Embrace. We're going to do a lot of training with our employees as we kick off the next school year, so that everybody has an understanding through common language, goals, what Embrace OKC stands for. I appreciate Marcia, Jason, Ken Elliott, many of our employees who have spent a lot of time really getting this on solid footing so that our kids can benefit from this. So really excited about our direction there. Next slide. So innovative transformation schools. We appreciate the support of the board. We were able to take our 4 that we identified as innovative transformation schools a year ago and add 4 more, including 2 of our middle schools. Shayna Perry, Dr. Perry is our dedicated ILD. We call her the shepherd. And then we have additional ILDs who are now joining with the schools that fall under their column that they oversee. So many of our employees this summer have gone through training with the University of Virginia, spent an entire week understanding the role and responsibility that each of us has. We saw some impressive gains in our benchmark testing and our attendance. And so we believe that now is the time to add additional schools to the innovative transformation model. We fully expect to see these 4 show the same gains as the previous 4. And what this translates to is academic achievement for kids and opportunities for kids. So very excited about that. And we'll bring you more information on innovative transformation schools throughout the summer and then throughout the year, and give you.
Dr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Appreciate Dr. Perry. She just got here, so I appreciate her working on this. I do have a concern because the transformation schools, there is no in the schools that I looked into and the schools that seem to be out there, there is no transformation in these schools. And the parents are saying there's no transformation. The parents are saying that their kids don't feel safe. The kids are afraid. Some of the kids are afraid to go to school. Some of the parents are afraid to send their kids to school. So if there's going to be any kind of transformation, it has to start with our revising our student code of conduct, because everything that we do, if we don't have a structured discipline policy and revive our student code of conduct, none of this will work. And I see some of the board members kind of looking up in the air and being frustrated. But if you're not a Black and brown person in the Black and brown community, and your child is not safe and is being bullied by other kids in that community, and you feel like your community is being overlooked, you shouldn't be frustrated and shouldn't be perturbed about what I said, because I'm speaking for what the people say. I'm not speaking for me. I'm speaking for all the calls and things that I get from people regarding their children that go to our schools. And so these are not transformation schools. No transformation. These schools actually got worse in the first stages of the implementation of P2G. That had nothing to do with Dr. Perry, obviously. But for us to sit here and say that these schools are transformation schools and have transformed is a false narrative that we can't project. And we have to be honest about it. And I wish that the presentation would be honest about what we can do to solve those problems. Because what happened at the John Marshall Enterprise Middle School last year should not have happened. What happened at Britain Elementary should not have happened. What happened at Moon Middle School should not have happened. There's some great administrators in some of those schools too. It wasn't all their fault, but they didn't have the resources that they were supposed to have in thinking that these were transformation schools. So we have to support our administrators. And I see some board members upset by what I say. If you're upset by what I say, then maybe you need to rethink about what you're doing, because these are children, and these are children that we are here to serve and protect for their parents, and their parents don't feel safe.
Thank you for the input, Mr. Henry. Just a quick comment on that. Transformational schools, it is not a flip of the switch. We don't name them transformation schools and then suddenly they are transformed. It's a process. We're taking our staff through the process. And as far as the student code of conduct, we heard you. I can't remember when you first brought that up, but we heard you, and we are currently looking at our student code of conduct to make some revisions to it. So again, thank you for your input, but we are really, really proud of the work that this district is doing with the innovative transformation schools. We are seeing success, and we expect to see even greater success as we move it forward. So
Dr.
thanks.
McDaniel, I just wanted to clarify that the reds are the original 4. The orange have never been a transformational school until this coming school year.
That's correct.
And those would be the 2 middle schools, FD Moon and John Marshall Enterprise.
That's correct, along with Cesar Chavez and Hayes Elementary. Those.
I just wanted to make sure that I was on track with that.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, Courtney.
Dr. McDaniel,
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to thank you for the presentation here. And I know that still, and I think that some are finally kind of getting what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the dashboard. And that, oftentimes it kind of get lost and think that I'm talking about just the academics part of it. The academics part of it is the part that we will reap the benefits from, but even the things that you have shared here today in a dashboard, giving us this update so that when the community is asking us questions about what are you doing in these, what or whatever, we're able to readily share. And also we could even share on our website. And so
Yes,
I'm not going to belabor that here, but anyway, that's kind of what I'm talking about. You've shared, but how do we get to this on a regular basis to where that we can see at any given time, where we are? Because oftentimes, as I've said to you and said to the board, that and just as you've said, we're doing some good things, but we don't tell our own story.
Right.
And so that's what that dashboard would do. It would tell our story for us rather than a whole year to go by now for us to hear what we have reaped from that. So just wanted to add that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Well said, Ruth. Thank you. Well said.
Okay, just report out. We were lacking a couple different buildings. Remember the 15, and big concern from the community, as it should have been, at what are we going to do with these buildings? We are now at 100% either partially or fully occupied. Here's our list that you've seen before. We closed, if you look down to the Green Pasture Studios, we closed on that not too long ago. So that's in the books as a sold building. And that was number 15. So take a quick look at that. And by the way, this will, Ms. Veals, to your point about communicating with our community, this presentation will live on our website so that anybody can go in at any time and see it. And then we will continue to update it. As we're working on a different version of the dashboard, this, obviously, this is not the dashboard. This contains some of the data that will also be provided on the dashboard. Okay, next slide. And then just our list, it's we're ever adding to the list of challenges and next steps. But this is something we keep in front of us weekly. We have conversations across the district with supervisors and teams about how to address these things. And so know that behind each one of these icons, there is a fully fleshed out plan that we work with regard to each one of these. And again, this is not a comprehensive list. This gives you a taste of those things that we're working on. And I believe, Courtney, that's it?
I do have one question.
Yes.
I have a question. So on your challenges slide, I'm always trying to think 5-10 years ahead. So Pathway to Greatness was almost, a year and a half now. We're at 80% utilization. We're still losing students. So talk about how you envision over the next 5 years, 5 to 7 years adjustments, because as our utilization continues to drop, we're at some point going to have to do something to address that again. Do you see another pathway to greatness, or is it a boundary adjustment, school more moderate? I guess that's what I'm looking for, is how are we going to adjust over the next 5 to 7 years as we continue to go down in utilization?
Well, typically when districts are faced with the data that we have, where we're a declining enrollment district, and that's the end of the story. We're a declining enrollment district. You have basically 3 options. You close schools, you adjust boundaries, or you begin increasing your enrollment. And so we like to think that because of the opportunities that exist and will continue to exist, and the student achievement numbers and attendance numbers and discipline numbers that will follow, which we believe are going to be better, we believe we're going to bring kids back and actually increase our enrollment. So we're talking about all 3 of those things. I think the good news is, and I don't know what your memory is about PRE projections over the next few years, but they actually, the numbers actually have us leveling out in the next 2 or 3 years, I believe. I can get that to you. That was prior to P2G. So we were going to decline, and then begin leveling out or plateauing with our enrollment. We introduced P2G now, and we believe that will enhance our enrollment. We believe that families are taking another look because we're able to add music and art and STEAM labs, and we're able to invite every single 5th and 6th grader to an extracurricular activity, whereas before P2G, only 1 in 6 were getting those opportunities. We're taking a big step this next year with our after school programming. And so for all these reasons, we believe that our enrollment will increase and that options 1 and 2 will not be things that we really need to spend a lot of time on. We do think about them. We do talk about those things, but we are confident that we're going to see an increase in enrollment.
And can I add also to that, please, quickly, that one of our policies that we passed sort of at the beginning of P2G was the long range facilities master plan. And so hopefully if we're assessing ourselves every 5 years, then we won't have to have a massive P2G again, because we'll be looking at that incrementally.
That's right. Thank you.
Also, yeah, I stand corrected on the Greystone John Marshall. It was an enterprise school. It was turned into an enterprise school, not a transformation school. But again, as far as if the numbers are declining and you're confident that things are going to get better, how is that going to happen if we don't have a proper student code of conduct so parents can make sure that their children feel safe going to school and kids are not being distracted? They're not kids that are being distracted in class. They're not being removed from the class into another comfortable setting that can be another academic setting. So I'm not trying to sound like a pessimist, but if we don't correct that issue and make sure that we have a safe environment for kids and also for teachers too, to be safe, not just physically safe, but safe in being able to teach, how can we assure that the pathway to greatness is going to work if we can't even solve that issue? Because if that issue is not solved, you can put all the money into the pathway to greatness and all, whether it's a long-term program, a long-range program, or any particular type of program. But if you don't have a structured discipline policy, for lack of a better term, meaning mainly a safe environment, not just from physical safety, but also just emotionally and mentally being safe and structured in your school environment. How's that going to work if we don't have a student code of conduct and a structured discipline policy to make that work?
Valid point. And as I stated just a little bit ago, we are working on revising the student code of conduct. We've done a number of different things, taken a number of different steps to make sure that our student code of conduct is not just, doesn't just look good in writing, but that we provide training. We set expectations for administrators, school resource officers, et cetera. And so again, we agree, Mr. Henry.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Let me continue on. And one more quick thing, and then I'll turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Jason Brown. You've been following, we've been reporting on our return to work program, and hopefully you saw that we extended phase 1 through this week. Today, we were actually scheduled to begin phase 2 of our return to work program, which had everybody, all 12-month employees coming back 5 days a week with restrictions. So what we decided to do based upon our circumstances and the information we have been provided is we have pushed phase 2 to next Monday. And even between now and then, we're going to continue to watch every day. And we're going to make a decision by the end of the week whether or not we're going to stick with a Monday phase 2 or if we're going to extend it again. And so just for all of our employees, for our board and community, we wanted you to know that right now we're still in phase 1, which is 2 days on, 3 days remotely. And we have even given our supervisors discretion in how they operate the 2 days on. We're even allowing them to work the 2 days on remotely. So we're just, everything we do is made with, the decisions are made with safety and welfare of everybody in mind. And so we'll continue to monitor. And then at the end of the week, we will put out the word on what next Monday looks like, whether it's continuing phase 1 or if we're going to begin phase 2. Without further ado, I want to turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Jason Brown, who has done yeoman's work with our task force, our various subcommittees, getting us to a place where we can present to you and to our community our best thinking with regard to what it looks like returning to school in the fall. Deputy Soup, you are up.
Thanks, Dr. McDaniel. I'm going to go ahead and start the back to school plan presentation. Whatever questions you may have, feel free to jump in. We'll also obviously have an opportunity at the end if you have any questions for clarification. A couple things before we get started. Number one, we are operating on what we know now, under the philosophy of hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And so it is presented in that fashion and from that frame of thought. The other thing I want to specify is that as I present this plan, please know that there's a lot of undergirding and there's a lot of supporting documentation to this plan that would be much too comprehensive to present just in a presentation format. So I'll allude to some of those documents. I'll talk about some of those documents. But what we want to do is give a nice overview and answer as many questions as possible about what our plan is to return to school in the fall. So I'll go ahead and share my, Craig, can you allow me to share my screen?
I will look and see. I'm sure Mr. Heilman can help us here. Do you have are there 3 little dots where there's a menu for you to share your screen on your dashboard?
I'm getting a message that says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Oh, well.
Try it now.
Courtney, can you pick him up?
No, I'm good now. It just allowed me. Thanks, Eric. I think I heard Eric's voice. So appreciate that. And can you guys see my screen at this point? Gotcha. Thanks, Dr. McDaniel. I see the thumbs up. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with our back to school plan, present some information. Again, please feel free to jump in and ask questions whenever you have one, or we'll have an opportunity at the end of the presentation for questions as well. And so as we prepare for the fall, and as I present this plan, because it is just a synopsis overview, basic information, though I prefer normally never to read slides or never to try to deeply paraphrase slides and allow the presentation to speak for itself, because there's so much information and this is already a synopsis, this is already a summary, then I am going to make sure that I either paraphrase or read the bullet points or the information just so that you have a complete understanding of the plan. So one of those being that—
Jason, is
Yes.
there a possibility that we could get this slide? We get the, I'm sorry, the presentation. Are you able to share it?
Meaning, can I share the actual presentation with you?
Yes, after, yes.
Oh, most definitely. We actually
Because
converting.
I was gonna try to take notes, and so if you can share it, I don't have to try to sit there, because I was gonna even take pictures of it, so.
No, ma'am, please do not take notes. You'll get a copy of this.
Okay.
It'll probably be easier to share in a PDF format.
Okay.
We also tried to create it in a sense so that it can be easily shared with our families and with our staff members. I believe we're in the process or already completed the process of translating this. We may have to make adjustments based on some of the questions or comments by several of you, but we will get this out not only to the public, but to you board members as quickly as possible, Ms. Fields. So one of the things I want you to know for planning for the fall is that we utilize a return to school task force to guide us, and that there was a set of core principles that we use to prepare for the fall. And I want you to know what those core principles are. They list them there in the narrative, but the next screen will actually sum those up. Number one, and some of our highest priorities, obviously, health and safety of students, a focus on learning, and especially addressing and closing the achievement gap that was experienced and the learning gap that was experienced by all of our students because of the abrupt ending to the school year. Our continuous learning plan, phase 1, and then phase 2, our summer learning plan. We did a yeoman's job again with trying to make sure that we shored up the lack of instruction that happened in the spring, but we know that we have to have a focus on learning for the fall and make sure we address any and all achievement gaps and gaps in learning that may have occurred because of the pandemic. We know that with the pandemic comes social and emotional needs. We know that we are already a district that has high ACE scores for our students, and we know that that's just attitude when it comes to the pandemic and the social unrest that's going on in our community. So we want to make sure we address the social and emotional needs. Equity always at the forefront. We want to make sure that all of our students have equitable access and opportunity to our learning plans and to any information that we share and to all of the possibilities that you'll see in this particular presentation. And then obviously, because of the evolving nature of COVID-19, we knew that one of our guiding principles needed to be that we had to be flexible or nimble so that we could pivot based on what might happen in the next few weeks, in the next few months, and as we endure this current worldwide pandemic. So in doing so, and this is, I believe, the information that most people are waiting for, in hoping for the best, preparing for the worst, we are preparing to return to school in a traditional format. We are hoping that individuals continue to abide by the CDC guidelines and regulations. We are hopeful that our students will be able to return. So we have put our energy and efforts into returning to a traditional format in the school starting on August 10th. Now, knowing that even with great improvement from this moment on, that not all parents and families will feel comfortable returning to a traditional setting. So for our 3rd grade through our 12th grades, Oklahoma City Public School will offer a virtual learning option. Now, this particular virtual learning option will be 100% online. We're going to talk about a new investment in our technology and our technology infrastructure in a moment, but I want you to know that for 3rd grade through 12th grade, the virtual option is 100% online. And that's something that our parents and families had told us they wanted via our survey following our continuous learning plan from the spring. Now that begs the question, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So when you say 100% online instruction, when we closed originally, we didn't come back from spring break. We had kind of virtual learning because we picked these packets up and you could click on things, but there was really no teacher attached to that. In the summer, when we had summer school, there were more face-to-face with the teachers during their virtual learning experience in the summer school. So where are we at when we say 100% online? Is that literally just the family picking it up and then doing all the work with them? Or are we going to have teachers who are dedicated to the online instruction?
So one, we are going to have virtual teachers available for 3rd grade through 12th grade, but it will be powered through a content management system. And for 6th grade through 12th grade, I can briefly talk about Edgenuity, which you will also see reflected in a few slides further down. But we have a content management system that is interactive for the student. So the student can get on and while it's a self-paced learning, and the student can do work, can practice, can take assessments, can take quizzes, can relearn, go back and get activities and do additional assignments. It still will be with the assistance and guidance of a virtual teacher. But when we say 100% online instruction, it means that there's a content management system, especially for 6th grade through 12th grade, that's a package or a one-stop shop in the sense that a person can move faster if they're self-paced, a person can go slower and do review again, and we still will have a teacher, a virtual teacher assigned to those students who will help guide that 100% online instruction.
What about the kindergarten through 2nd grade?
So thank you, Mr. Henry. That begs the question of pre-K through 2nd grade. So again, going back to our guiding principles, you'll have to remember that not only do we have a focus on learning, but we also have a focus on equity and meeting the needs of our students. We know that there will be some parents who will not feel comfortable sending their pre-K through 2nd grader back to school. And so there will be a remote learning option for those parents and those families. However, we have not settled on an online tool that we feel comfortable with adequately educating in that self-paced system our pre-K through 2nd graders. We feel, and it is our belief, going back to our core principles, that for every grade, the best education and the best instruction is provided direct and face-to-face. And with particular populations being pre-K through 2nd, special education, and those who already are needing to catch up instructionally, that direct instruction is the best instruction. So it was hard for us to recommend for our plan to the fall and give as just an open-ended option for pre-K through 2nd, 100% online. There will be a remote option for parents who don't feel comfortable, but it will not be similar to the other grades where it's 100% online instruction. And even though it's guided by a teacher, there's a lot of self-paced and content management. We feel like we have to keep a little more hands-on because we prefer all of our pre-K through 2nd kids to actually be on site. Knowing that's not going to happen, we're in the process of developing exactly what remote instruction looks like for that group. We just feel like that's a special population. And that's similar to decisions made around the state and around the country. It is hard to truly give an online option to pre-K through 2nd just because of the early informative years and their developing reading and their learning habits. So that's why you don't see pre-K through 2nd there.
I'm sorry.
I would assume also you said attention span, and so I didn't get the last part about. I had to step out for a minute actually, but the attention span, I know that's pretty hard for pre-K through 2nd grade, but you're saying that there will be an option, but it's going to be a remote option. And so I'm assuming that remote option is going to have some type of special considerations for social distancing, or what do you mean exactly by remote option?
When we say remote option, we mean in contrast to to school or brick and mortar school. So they will learn, most or all of their learning will be remotely. And so when we use the word virtual, virtual is obviously remote, but it also means 100% online. We're just going to have a little more touch and a little more interaction with our pre-K through second kids. I could give you there's a long list of reasons and reasons for the recommendation from our early childhood team. It was just hard for them to recommend a full virtual option for pre-K through second. And so they're still working on exactly what that would look like for parents of pre-K through second kids. We, again, still believe direct instruction is the best instruction. So they are working on how they give the best education to those kids whose parents happen to want that option of them staying at home and learning remotely.
I would assume that parental involvement would probably be more critical for the pre-K through the second grade versus the third grade. Is that?
Well, and you've listed even just a couple, attention span, learning to read, need for more adult involvement and parental involvement in their learning. And so there are a variety of reasons why early childhood just cannot recommend a full virtual option at this time.
If I can ask, okay, I don't want to, if I can ask the question, this right here is going to be to the part where I guess I need to understand what the remote, because in my interpretation, and I have two grandchildren in two different states, Texas and Georgia, and they have the virtual classrooms. And that's where that it's a classroom to where, you know, they all check in through the computer, and that they have a teacher that's there and giving instructions, you know, just the only difference is that they're not physically in a classroom together, but they have a set time to where that they have a set course and they have a teacher that's present through this. And so is this different from what we're talking about?
No, that would be a good description of a possible remote learning option. What we wanted to specify in this plan, Ms. Bills, is that where we have a content management system that we've already decided upon, already reviewed, and that we feel comfortable in, we do not have what we would call a content management system for pre-K through second that the students can move at self-pace. But we will have a remote learning plan for those students out that could look very much like what you described. It's going to have to be more high touch than just simply allowing students to move through a 100% online platform. And so,
I'm not just speaking from, I hear Mr. Henry is talking about from K through 2 or whatever. I'm speaking of for all levels, from K through 2.
okay. Well, thank you. For the full virtual program, if you're going to go 100% online, then though you will have connectivity and interaction with your teacher, and there may be some lessons where the teacher gathers a small group or even everyone on their roster to teach a certain concept, because students with 100% online instruction can move at different paces. There will not be any mass gathering of classes for every single lesson online, similar to our Zoom meeting today. Yeah, because students will be sometimes at different spots while they're being guided by a teacher. The teacher can work one-on-one. The teacher can bring a small group into a virtual meeting and work on a concept that they see that multiple kids are struggling with, but it will not necessarily be 25 kids, you log on, we're going to teach this lesson virtually. We're talking about, for our virtual option, 100% online instruction powered through software.
And I understand what you're saying, but I'm also, and this is just a thought too, because I heard you talking about the self-pace. I heard you working on their own self-pace. And so, you know, I can see that would be to have someone, to have an actual teacher, a virtual classroom, and keeping them on point. I can see also to where that if you have a student that needs a little bit more support, that there's another platform for them outside of that particular time span to where they're able to do. And if they need to talk to the teacher, well, then to get more help in that particular situation, well, then they have that available to them as well. If, again, just like we have And we've been at, ever since for the whole 11 years almost 11 years I've been on this board, this has been one of the conversations as far as even in the physical classrooms, to where that they say, okay, well, which students do we teach? Do we teach the ones that are far behind and leave the ones who are advanced, let them, kind of fall down because they're not, not give them the attention. I see it as the same situation and scenario, but I see it as even more of an opportunity to where that we're able to teach on the level to where for all, given the basics, but then if you have one that's falling behind, that there's also extra opportunities for them to work at a pace to catch them up. If it's one that needs to go further than what has been taught, then that also will allow them to excel above where they have been able to learn in that virtual classroom. And I'm going to leave it at that because I know we could go on and on. So I'm going to leave it at that. Just one.
No, that's great, Ms. Vills. Actually, we would term that differentiated instruction, and you are 100% correct that 100% online instruction allows us to differentiate instruction more so than we've ever been able to in the past. So thank you for that. Some of the questions may be answered moving forward, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next
Carrie
slide.
had one question for you, Jason. Carrie's
Yeah,
been trying
go
to get
ahead. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Ms. Jacobs.
No, that's okay. I had a question about enrollment. So will those kids remain enrolled in their, whatever their school is, their neighborhood school, or is this going to be a separate online school? Like if they're a senior going to Douglas, will they then graduate from Douglas just like they would have if they were in person?
Great question. Number one, if they were a senior at Douglas, yes, they would graduate from Douglas. For us, working on where to place them on a roster, we are trying and experimenting with a couple different options. Number one would be a school within a school, and a school within a school would be that Star Spencer students, Douglas students, Northwest Classen students, all individually are still grouped by Northwest Classen, Douglas, and Star Spencer. There is some thought that you could get greater utilization for certain courses if you didn't have enough students, let's say at Northwest Classen, that enrolled in a certain virtual course, that you actually could have one teacher who taught Northwest Classen students, Star Spencer students, and Douglas students all at the same time and teaching that same course. Whether they would all need to be enrolled under a virtual school like a virtual high, that's the part that we're looking at. We're trying to leverage some of that, but we want to get the best use out of our online tool and make sure that we access our best virtual teachers to provide the best instruction. And so it appears right now will look like more of a school within a school. But we did determine early on that if you're a Northwest Classen Knight, if you're a Douglas Trojan, if you're a Star Spencer Bobcat, you will still graduate as a Star Spencer Bobcat and Douglas Trojan and Northwest Classen Knight. So.
Thank you.
So for our parents and our families who are out there who may be watching or who may see this presentation or get this presentation later, obviously for some of them, as they look at the COVID-19 pandemic situation, they're going to have to make a choice, traditional learning plan or virtual learning plan. So we want to talk a little bit about what each of those look like so that they help parents make the best decision possible. I know some of the next slides will answer questions that a lot of individuals have as well about what traditional learning will look like if I send my student back. So here's what traditional learning will look like under our traditional learning plan. So school will still start in traditional manner on August 10th. All the courses, classes taken at your regularly assigned school site, you'll still basically report to Southeast, report to Grant High School, you report to Wheeler Middle School. In-person instruction with a traditional academic day. We have not explored the pot. We have explored it. We did not decide to alter the calendar at this point. I know you'll hear a lot of other districts who may have adjusted their calendar or altered their calendar. You'll hear why here in a little bit, but please know that right now our calendar will remain the same. Traditional learning will start on August 10th. School day will look the same. Now, the schools will look very different upon entering. We have multiple health and safety measures implemented at each site. Some of the documents that I talked about that support this learning plan, we developed a return to school. First, we had a task force for health and safety, a work group rather for health and safety that developed a list of recommendations. From those recommendations, we developed a comprehensive document that we call our Return to School Health and Safety Protocols. And right now, that document is already sitting at over 30 pages. And what it does is it outlines for administrators, for teachers, what the protocols are on returning to school and what some of those health and safety measures look like. You'll get a synopsis of some of those here, but we've tried to think about every scenario that would happen in a school site, from lunch to faculty meetings to changing classes. But we, again, a 30-page comprehensive document that we put together for protocols. A couple of those here being that we'll talk a little bit more about here in a moment. Want to finish with this slide, and then we'll get to some multiple health and safety measures. So under the traditional learning plan, all students will be issued devices. This is huge for such a short bullet point. This means that Oklahoma City Public Schools moves to a 1-to-1 district pre-K through 12. You'll get a glimpse here in a moment of what those devices are, but all students being issued devices is a huge hurdle to cross and to jump, and a huge success for Oklahoma City Public Schools to move to a 1-to-1 district. The final bullet point on this screen: increase utilization of technology in order to be flexible and retain the ability to adapt. Because again, one of our core principles is flexible models in order to adapt to the evolving nature of the pandemic. So some of your questions that some of you may have had earlier, I think will be answered as we hit these slides that talk about these last 3 bullet points in a little greater detail, starting with the health and safety measures. So just a synopsis of this 30-page document. Number 1, daily temperature checks for every student and staff member. We feel like that's necessary to identify individuals who may be sick, who may have symptoms. Those are things that you see in the public sector today. We feel like that's an adequate safety measure. When I say adequate, that's an appropriate, safety measure to implement. Screening of all visitors via health attestations and temperature checks. If you've gone to some places, people have asked you certain questions upon entering. We're going to make sure that any visitor that enters our building, that we're going to make sure we ask them those similar questions. Have you been around someone who's been confirmed as positive? Have you ran a temperature in the last several days? Have you shown symptoms? We just want to make sure that we have some sort of screener for all of our visitors, and we can do that via health attestations, basically answering questions, and temperature checks. Third bullet there, deep sanitation of our campuses and buses, especially high touch areas. We'll do that obviously on a daily basis. Our operations department has been working on misters and various things and devices that will help us move through the building and move through buses quicker and with a deeper cleaning than we have been able to in the past. Obviously, starting the school day, hand sanitizers on buses with drivers who will have masks and monitors who will have masks. The last bullet there, procedures and protocols, and I alluded to that document, to increase physical and social distancing on buses and classrooms during lunch, at recess, and during arrival and departure times. I'll go ahead and answer a question that someone may have already, and that is the social distancing and physical distancing recommendations, or suggestions rather, considerations, I believe they're called, by the CDC. We will, under the traditional learning plan, we will not reach that threshold in all of our classrooms of 6 feet apart. In talking with our health officials and talking with our state officials, we're approaching our health and safety measures through a layered approach. We are trying to put as many barriers as possible between individuals and as much distance as possible. But those considerations by the CDC of 6 feet, and some of those pictures you've seen where you can only fit 4 people on a bus or 5 people on a bus and only 10 people in a classroom, as where we stand today at the end of June, we will not be meeting those CDC considerations under the traditional learning plan. But we will have a layered approach to our safety. Some of the additional bullet points you see there: marked one-way traffic in hallways, bathroom monitoring to avoid overcrowding, plexiglass dividers in cafeteria, front office areas and other high traffic areas, mobile hand sanitizer stations for every classroom. Here are a couple things that we have had people that ask about, so I will pause for a moment and make sure I adequately hit these last 3 bullets. face shields and masks for those staff members whose job require extreme close proximity with students. We have special education teachers and nurses and some of our health individuals, PT, OT, individuals who work in extremely close proximity with students or other adults. For those that are going to be that close face to face, similar to our health officials, we would recommend a face shield and a mask. We're going to purchase face shields and masks for those health officials. We are going to require face coverings for all staff and all visitors. So I know that's something that people wanted to know. We are not going to require at this point, unless our state officials require everyone to wear masks in public over a certain age. We are not requiring masks for our students, but we are encouraging all students, and we will have masks available for students who ask for a mask. So face coverings required for all staff and visitors, mask available to and encouraged for all students, but at this point not required of all students unless that changes at a state level. Questions on a synopsis of our health and safety measures before moving on?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How is this funding coming from the CARES Act, or is this, I mean, I presume this is more than we normally are spending on these kinds of things. Is that CARES Act money, or is that coming from somewhere else?
CARES Act money. That is the very reason we felt like that it was provided. And so CARES Act money is where we are purchasing this material from. We are hoping that the supply chain holds up and things arrive on time, knowing that most schools, we try to get a jump start, but knowing that a lot of schools, as they reach this point in their plan, will then see the need to start ordering the stuff. So we're trying to get ahead, or we have actually already started ordering quite a bit of personal protective equipment. So yes, CARES Act money, to answer your question, Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Yes, Mr. Henry.
I do like some of the precautions that you have. I do have a question though. You said we're going to go according to state measures. And so our governor in our state is kind of relying on what is happening nationally with our president, Donald Trump, as far as what we should and should not do. So my concern, if it gets to a situation where it seems prudent to do something in a certain manner, but the state hasn't moved that way yet, we as a local school district can expand what the state does, correct?
That is correct. And when I sometimes interchange, I'll use state officials. So much of our guidance, when we say state officials, we talk about our governor, our mayor, our state superintendent of public instruction, as well as our state health officials, Oklahoma City County Health Department. And so we would make sure that our board had access to all of those recommendations and information. But you are right, you can go as a board above and beyond anything dictated by the state.
Are we relying more on one of those particular entities that you talked about the governor and the mayor and some state agencies? Is there one in particular that we're relying on more than the other?
We have a wonderful director of health services, Ms. Anika Wilson, who stays in constant contact with not only our state elected officials, but specifically our state health officials. So from our Oklahoma City County Health, and in also taking recommendations from CDC and the National Institute of Health, we feel like she is our point of contact and our liaison to our state health officials. So Oklahoma City County Health, as well as things that are passed down from a national level at CDC and National Institute of Health, are where we are getting most of our recommendations from to make our plan.
And my last question, as far as the masks for the students and maybe even the staff, are those disposable or cloth?
A combination of both. Recently reviewed today a plan from OU on what they're providing for their staff, and they're providing a combination of masks. So you really so often people talk about just the disposable mask. Obviously, you have the washable mask, you have disposable mask, and you have a face shield. And so we want to make sure that while we require a face covering, that our staff can choose the one that's most appropriate for them. So we're talking about a combination of those purchasing a combination of those PPE devices.
What about the student? Are they going to be provided with a washable, or would it be disposable?
for the most part, masks are made available to students since we're not requiring those. Those will, I would say on most part, be disposable in a sense of when a student asks for one, if they forgot one or they feel a need for one, because we feel like that's probably a little more nimble, that they can just dispose of that mask. And so I would imagine, but if that it would be disposable. I don't want to put that in concrete because if we have another opportunity to buy masks to give to kids that they could then wash, I'm sure we'd take advantage of that. But I would imagine we can stay most nimble by giving disposable masks.
Thank you.
I had one other question. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Carrie.
So what's the reasoning for not requiring masks of students? I understand why little ones, why that would be a challenge, but for secondary students and middle school students, is there a concern that there could be a split? Or, I mean, we all were in middle school, if it was like not cool to wear a mask and then kids would stop wearing them, what was the reason for not requiring students to wear masks?
That's a great question. And we went back and forth on this quite a bit. And we ultimately settled with our recommendation with our health and safety work group. But honestly, requiring students masks presents a variety of issues. Number one, students are required to be there, whereas employees are employed to be there. So to have a student who's required to be at school and then make them wear a mask, we thought was different level than asking or requiring an employee who's a paid employee and chooses to be there to wear a mask. The other item is that for students who did not wear a mask or who put their mask down or didn't have one day, we didn't want to create a situation where we turned not having a mask into a discipline issue and interaction between an adult and a student. We didn't want to increase, and it is it's such a harsh word, but the synonym that I'm thinking of is we didn't want to turn that into the criminalization, for lack of a better term, of not having a mask on, because what are the consequences for students? That would be discipline. So we're going to address not having a mask by disciplining you, and that was too big of a leap. But because of the safety factor, we debated that long and hard. If again the city or state or this board, even as a governing body, decides that we need to require that for students, obviously we can pivot and do that. But it was not the recommendation of the work group, and so it wasn't the recommendation as part of this plan.
So I do understand those. I mean, it's just, I understand that those are all critical issues, and you never want, I mean, you don't want to turn a kid away from school or make them go home or something like that because they don't have a mask or they forgot it or something like that. But I wonder, and I would hope that that you all would monitor mask use among students. And see, if we get maybe a month into school and no kids are wearing masks, it might be something to revisit just for their own safety. So I understand the pros and cons and the difficulties, but it might just be something I think to revisit once school starts to see, for students' own safety, for their families, for staff, just something to keep an eye on maybe.
Most definitely. And please know that obviously even on an hour by hour basis and day by day basis, you see in the news where either different communities or organizations are moving to requiring. So that's something that we trust me, we try to, and we're going to order some more, but we wanted to have as much available. And so that's one of those that we will need, if we have to pivot, we'll be ready to pivot. So thank you for that.
I have comments about this mask and not being required from the students. I had a teacher to contact me over a couple of weeks ago, and I did reach out to the superintendent about this. So, I know that a group of you guys got together and had this discussion, but have you discussed this with the ones that are going to be in the classroom? Because I could hear the frantic in this person's voice to reach out to me about that. It was in disbelief that the district would not be requiring that students wear masks. I'm in that same, I'm at that same level, you know, of disbelief. And as I even shared with the superintendent, you know, I know that this would be a challenge because just like even we have a different fundraising group that every year they go and they try to get coats for each of the children, and then the children lose the coats or whatever. So, you know, I know that that can be a challenge, but there's a difference in being cold versus being dead. And so, you know, with mask and all, as we hear even from the doctors, Dr. Fauci and others, you know, that are experts in this area for disease control, it tells us that the mask is not for necessarily for us, it's for the other person. So in the health issue of even our staff, that if these students don't have masks on and that they cough, well, then are we putting our staff at risk? You know, and if this to me is enough to where that I think that it really needs to have real serious conversation, and that the people who are going to be on the front line, and that would be staff, administrators. Also, we have when people come into our buildings, and this was a part of the conversation as well, is that, you know, are they required to wear masks as they come into visitors, parents, some, you know, a vendor, you know, and so this is one that I definitely would, you know, hope that we err on the side of caution rather than on the side of, well, but again, we'll just monitor it closely, I guess, but I do have concerns about that, great concerns.
Well, thank you, Ms. Bills. I would agree with you. And to answer a couple of your questions, especially those right there at the end, yes, yes, and yes, we will be requiring visitors, vendors, individuals who enter our buildings. We are requiring that they have a face covering. And to your first question, that have we solicited those who will be on the front lines? We actually have. We still need the help of our staff to continue to flesh out, to review some of our protocols, to flesh out where they feel like we might have gaps. We know that the more eyes that can look at it, the better. But we have solicited the input and opinion of teachers. I know that we have worked wonderfully and cooperatively with our union, our AFT. They had their own safety work group who presented a series of questions as far as and a series of concerns or a set of questions that were in a list of concerns. And so we have done that and presented that to them. And you're right, this is a critical one. And again, if it turns out to be the board's purview at some point, as we continue to provide feedback to you as a group to have students do that, then our plan will allow us to pivot to do that. So thank you very much for those questions, guys. I'm going to move to some of the other detail on the traditional learning plan.
Jason,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Lewis.
we're hitting the 2-hour mark, so people might need a small recess if we have a lot more. How many more slides do you think you have?
Those were the big ones, how we're returning and what are the health and safety measures. And we're going to hit the virtual learning plan here in just a few slides, but most of those questions have already been asked about the virtual. So I think we're past the bulk of it. So I can try to move more swiftly, but we are slide wise, we're probably right in the middle, but we've passed the bulk of the heavy lifting.
Okay. Board, anybody have any thoughts on a small recess, 2 to 3 minutes? Is everybody good to go? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Forge ahead.
Put your head.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I will try to both still be comprehensive, but yet move as quickly as possible. And then maybe we can wrap up at the end with questions. So on the traditional learning plan, devices for all students, iPad for all students and teachers pre-K through second. And we're going to talk about why that's so important here in a moment. And then Chromebooks for all students, 3rd through 12th grade. Here's why those devices are important, not only because it moves us to one-to-one, it helps us even in our traditional sense, reimagine learning with increased use of technology, and adheres to our guiding principle that we need to have flexible models. So number one, and this is a little bit of what we talked about earlier, this is not the virtual, these are just the students that are returning, also will have access to technology, and still allow some of the benefits that the virtual students will have. So 2 bullet points. Number one, that will allow access to learning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So every student that's enrolled in Oklahoma City will have a device. We also have used some of our CARES money, bond money, and some incentive grants from the state to get hotspots for students revealed by our survey who did not have internet connectivity, as well as those that we find do not have internet connectivity as we go. So if we can get a device and connectivity to every single one of our students, this will allow learning to take place outside of just the walls of our building. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they'll have access to it. We don't expect everyone to do work or homework, but they'll have access to learning, access to assignments. The learning management system, bullet point 2, is different than a content management system. A learning management system is a way that teachers and students interact through technology. And so teachers, instead of handing out a worksheet, handing out information, they can still provide a hard copy, but a copy of that can be uploaded into the learning management system. A review sheet can be uploaded into the learning management system that either the student or the parent can then access 24 hours a day. They can see what the assignment looks like. They can work on the assignments. They can have access to assignments. And so assignments and activities being accessible to students will be huge for our district and allows us to teach really in a different way. And it really allows us to combine, even through the traditional sense, a combination of online and face-to-face learning. There are a couple narratives here that I think are important, but I don't want to belabor the point and utilize the time of the board or the public who may be watching. But just know that our technology initiative and the integration of technology is huge for us, and it allows us to increase engagement with students because obviously a focus on learning was one of our guiding principles. And so we do think we can increase student outcomes. We're going to use this pandemic as an opportunity to change the way that we're doing some things in the district. It allows students to move to a higher level. Ms. Veals did a great job of talking about differentiation and how students who are gifted sometimes don't have access to additional challenging resources because they're taught at the same timeline of students. And then at the same time, some students are left behind. That's the problem with traditional education that's taken place in this country over the last century or so. Technology allows us to differentiate and allows us to push students to upper levels of Bloom taxonomy and depth of knowledge to allow them to really engage with the subject matter. So those are just great. I could nerd out on the education stuff all day, but I wanted to show you why that increase in technology allows us such great flexibility. So imagine, if you will, we have a portion of our students who are doing virtual learning already. They're online because they're uncomfortable or unable to return. And then we had a portion of our students who return. But imagine, sadly, and it's not hard to imagine, but imagine if the number of positive cases of COVID-19 rise to the point that they have to shut us down again. And they say, look, you either have to limit the number of students to 10 per class. If some of you remember the first phases of our reopening, they were still limited to no gatherings, no more than 10 or more, and then 50 or more. So if something were to happen where we were limited, we have now developed the opportunity to still engage students with a combination of in-face instruction and online instruction because of the infusion of technology for even those that are returning to a traditional sense. So it would allow us, we're developing a contingency plan that will allow only a portion of the students in the building on any given day if the pandemic evolves to the point where we have a second wave where we have to truly limit the number of students. So I'm not saying that this is the plan that we've come up with because we're looking at a couple different options, but a sample of a contingency plan would be, what if some of the students who come traditionally have to report on Monday and Tuesday, while the others learn remotely, and then on Wednesday and Thursday, the B or second half of the students report. That would allow you to cut the number of students who are attending school in half, the number who are riding a bus in half, while still engaging the student. That's our contingency plan for if things just get really bad or if they start to try to shut us down because of the rise in cases, then we're able to remain flexible enough and we'll implement our contingency plan. It also allows our teachers then to more easily move to online instruction and full virtual instruction and have time to prepare for it, as opposed to just having a couple of weeks to prepare for it as we did in the spring. So that's huge for us to have that contingency plan in place so that parents who opt to have their kids return know that we still will be preparing for it just in case we have another shutdown or a second wave. So that's huge for us. That's what traditional learning looks like, a traditional learning plan. I will talk very briefly about what the virtual learning plan looks like that we've already outlined for 3rd through 12th. As we've already said before, it's 100% online learning through a content management system. We will provide the device. Students don't have to worry about going to buy a device. Students have 24/7 accessibility to content. They can work, they can move ahead, they can work on math for a long period of time and go 3 hours working on math if they want to, or they can work 15 minutes on math and 15 minutes on English and 15 minutes on social studies. But that allows them to move at a self-pace. Each student will also have a virtual teacher to provide that goal setting assistance and provide guidance throughout their virtual learning. There have been some work groups that have been focused on selecting the appropriate content management system. Again, I alluded to 6th through 12th grade. We'll be using the Edgenuity courseware. A lot of our sister districts use this system. We will be implementing it this year, and we are finalizing plans for we have a couple different options for 3rd through 5th, but we like the options. Again, we did not set forth a pre-K through 2nd option because we have not found viable options for fully online instruction. And so that again explains one of the reasons why we opted for the 3rd through 12th grade as a full online option. So a couple of the scenarios and questions, and under the traditional learning scenario, here's kind of like a decision map if things were to happen. Someone wants to know what if. So if you return to school under the traditional plan, what if the state closes schools again? That's that top arrow at the top. Students could then just move to a virtual learning plan. They have devices, we have make sure to have connectivity. And so if they close school again, all students would then move to a virtual learning plan and we'll be prepared, we'll be ready.
May I ask you a quick question on that particular part? Are we preparing the children that will be attended in a traditional way to where that they will know how to use the virtual platform in order to, to where they can jump right in without,
Yes, part of the learning that will take place, and it'll be a learning curve, to be honest, Ms. Beals, but that getting used to accessing learning through technology, to have even students who return to school to say, hey, I need you to open your Chromebooks and access, chapter 5, the first assignment, and let's talk about that assignment as opposed, so to get them accustomed to utilizing technology and getting our teachers accustomed to teaching through the use of technology. Yes, that's something that's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, but that's what we're going to do PD over with our teachers, and it'll be an introduction to our students when we return. So yes, ma'am. The second arrow is what if the state limits how many students can be in the building? We just talked about that with the contingency plan. We would use the contingency plan. Students will learn through a mix of in-person or virtual. You see a or there, and the or is because we know that if a parent opts to send their student to school, it may be difficult if we have to move to a contingency plan. We've heard from parents that said, look, I want them to go to school and I need as much teacher interaction as possible, but having them 2 days on, 3 days off, that may be a little more difficult. It's easier to know one way or another. So they could move to the virtual learning plan. So that's why we have the or. Also, the last arrow, what if my student gets sick or someone in the home is positive for COVID-19? So in other words, what if someone starts out traditional, but for whatever reason, hey, I can't come to school. I'm not able to come to school, or I have to quarantine or isolate. The infusion technology would allow that student to continue to learn remotely. So they'll still interact with that same teacher, planning their return. If they weren't going to return, or the parent said we need to go full virtual, again, you see a or there, because they could then move to just the virtual learning plan.
Jason?
Yes.
So you address if they start in brick and mortar, they start virtual, do they have to wait like 9 to a quarter or a semester to return back to brick and mortar if they start virtual?
We've had that conversation, and we had that conversation even as late as today. It's sometimes some of our issue that we have to suffer through when some of our students or parents opt for Epic because they re-enter, and it's tough for a re-entry. We are trying, if we can utilize the technology and have teachers teach in a traditional sense, utilize the technology, we're hoping to ease them back if they opt for traditional. Ideally, it would be easier to ease back at an appropriate incremental time. For example, at the 9-week mark, ease students back. But we also can't tell a parent, hey, you want to come back traditionally, we need you to wait 2 weeks for that. We can advise a parent that instructionally, it may be an easier time to ease back as they continue on their virtual. But obviously, just like we do now, if a student has to come back, we take students who walk in our buildings. We have our obligation to educate them. But ideally, there are some reentry points for virtual to traditional. The virtual scenarios are a lot easier. What if the state closes again? You're learning virtual. What if they limit? You're still learning virtual. What if a student gets sick or someone in the home is positive? The student is still on a virtual learning plan. And so all of those arrows still point to you would just continue with your virtual learning plan.
May I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
As the teacher instructions, the lesson plans, are we kind of going to be using a similar lesson plan for both traditional and virtual? Because again, to address the conversation prior, as far as if a student decided they wanted to go back, go from a virtual to the classroom, or if they wanted to come from the classroom, to where they're not thrown off. Are we looking at the different the lesson plans? Are they so far off to where that they would be kind of like, a loss for time or whatever?
No, ma'am, they're not. We are. Here's the problem where the reentry occurs. Not necessarily in a difference in lessons or curriculum, because we think the Edgenuity curriculum and the lessons that are the great lessons that are being prepared by our curriculum department and some of our model teachers that they're working on this summer will work both virtually and traditional. Because a student is differentiated, because a student may work ahead virtually, so they may re-enter. And even though it's the same curriculum, they're 2 weeks further on English, but 1 week behind on math. And again, traditional, the same education system we've had since the 18th century. And that is, you go a certain number of days a school year, try to cover the topics. So it moves sometimes at a lockstep pace, even with the infusion of technology. So a student who has worked far ahead in one may re-enter, and that the re-entry can present problems. We see that all the time, but also we adjust to that on a regular basis when a student moves from one district to another, when a student moves from one school to another, when a student comes back from a charter school. So we will have less of an adjustment than some of those others, but I would be deceiving you if I didn't say there would be some adjustment when they come back, even with identical or very similar curricula.
Jason, I have
go
a
ahead.
question. It looks like, we're structuring this to continue even beyond the COVID-19, having these options available.
Yes.
So my question would be, if a kid is enrolled at, say, Northwest Classen High School in the virtual program, would they be able to still participate in band, football, basketball, extracurricular activities?
We have that as an option. Yes, we didn't want to get too fancy with this
Well,
presentation.
I know right now that's hard, but in the future, if that's an option that kids pick and we continue to offer, that was my question, was would they have the ability to continue in extracurriculars?
That is where we're moving forward as a district, and honestly, even as a state. Virtual instruction now, and that's one of the reasons you guys had a policy on your agenda tonight to talk about virtual attendance. The state allows us, if we have a policy, to still count students in attendance. So a student can work at home virtually for 4th, 5th, and 6th hour theoretically, and then come to school and be counted there for their orchestra class. And so, but still be present for their other classes that were done virtually. So that gets a little more a little complex, but this technology and this plan allows us to pivot towards that, to provide that opportunity in the future.
Thank you.
Jason?
Yes.
Jason, I got a couple of questions, a couple of texts. One was some people are wondering about the teachers. Should there be a preference for them to wear the face shields so the students can read lips, and have that effective communication? And so is there any reasoning or anything about why not the teachers should, be required to use the face shields instead of using a mask? Also, I had another text about students that are hearing impaired. I would assume that the teacher would wear a face mask if they were, hearing impaired or hearing limitations. And then another question was about when you talked about the pre-K to 2nd grade, there was needed to be some clarity as far, not from your part, because you're doing a great job, but just in regards to is there going to be virtual learning for pre-K through 2nd grade? So I can explain one by one, but the first question was about the face shields.
No, I can hit all of those. Let me start backwards and move to your first question, but starting with your last question, yes, we know that even though we would love to have all of our pre-K 2nd kids back, we know that some parents, regardless of our recommendation, and I don't blame them. I mean, as parents, that's their right to make, say, I'm not comfortable with my child returning. And so we will have an option for those kids. We are just not comfortable with the options we've seen so far that we don't think anything appropriately even gets close to what we can do at the site for such a critical group, but we will have an option, and it will be a high quality option. So yes, there still will be a chance for pre-K to 2nd students if parents choose that. In regards
with a virtual, so is there not at this time, there's no virtual learning option for pre-K through 2nd grade, or is there a virtual learning option?
We didn't, to be completely transparent, Mr. Henry, because number one, we feel like the best instruction is direct instruction, and we know we still have to provide an option. We didn't necessarily want to advertise an option that we were not 100% in support of or behind. But I want individuals who hear this presentation to know that if you're not comfortable, they will not go without. We will have a high quality plan. We just have not settled on one that we're comfortable with, but we will have one for pre-K through 2nd.
And so as far as a high quality plan, I think the distancing measures. So if it's not virtual learning, you mentioned about remote. And so I guess whatever plan it will be, it sounds like it's going to be like in the presence of other students, but maybe some type of, so have you all thought that through yet? Or are you just still kind of looking into it? Because I think what they're going to say is, if I prefer to have that option, but if that's not an option, I kind of want to know now what the other option would be instead of my child being in class. So is there going to be another option, alternative, or is this going to be just one option? Is it going to be in class until you all say something different, or is there going to be an alternative option for those parents that are uncomfortable with their children pre-K through 2nd going to school?
Yes, I use the word remote, and so because I say there's a difference between at school or at home, and so yes, there will be an alternative to physically coming to school for pre-K through 2nd. It may not be 100% online. It may be very similar to what Ms. Bills described, where you are still engaging with those kids during a regular schedule, maybe through a video camera, or maybe through online instruction that takes place, again, a little more high touch. We just know that they can't move at a self pace. We cannot sit them in front of a computer and say, hey, here you go with a little guidance and some assistance. We're going to have something more in depth, but there will be an alternative to physically coming to school for those parents who want or need that alternative for pre-K through 2nd.
And I think the question is semantics, because I think what you just said about, having like a live teacher video camera, I still think that's still considered to be like an online learning. So I think there may be some about the wording about what actually it is, because I think it all kind of comes under the general mention of just online learning. It's just different types of online learning. It's kind of what it is. But I thank you for that clarification.
And then you had a question about mask. You'll notice in our presentation when I send it to you, and I'm afraid I get lost if I try to backtrack some slides, but in our slides, we purposely use the phrase face coverings for adults because it still befuddles me why when people complain about masks, they simply just don't wear a shield or something that's comfortable to them that still provides the same type of personal protective for them, personal protection and protection for others. And so, yes, a shield will be, there's some that I've seen a variety of face coverings. And so we didn't want to require our teachers to wear a particular type. We just want them to have a face covering. And so a shield is more than acceptable. And to go along with that, you mentioned our hearing impaired, I think was your second question. So we have a number of devices that when I was in the classroom was called a red cat device, but they're a sound amplification device. So ideally, I would love for our teachers to still be able to utilize a sound amplification device for students who may be hard of hearing. And we utilize that in our special needs program now. We've looked at purchasing quite a few more. And for those that they still need to engage with students, make eye contact, have them read their lips. Again, I think a face shield is more appropriate. So it's face covering, and that does not necessarily mean a mask that has to cover their face.
Yeah, so they wanted to know like a clear face shield so they can see their lips.
Correct.
So will a device be provided for like particularly pre-K through second grade students who want to participate in the virtual plan or whatever type of online instruction? And also your presentation today, will it be uploaded on the website so public citizens can view this as well?
Yes, we created it in a format purposely so that it could be shared with our community, our families, our public, as well as board members, which is why I wanted everyone to know there's a lot of supporting. This is not all of it, but this is so as we don't overwhelm with a lot of the details and protocols, but it is, yes, will be made for public consumption.
Will devices be made available?
Yes, iPads, pre-K through second, Chromebooks, 3rd through 12th.
Thank you.
Yes.
I do have a couple additional questions, if you don't mind. I know that a lot of our students, particularly art supplies and things like that, will just share them in class so that every kid doesn't have to buy their own. And I mean, I know in the environment we're in now, that's not going to happen. Do we have a contingency plan in place to make sure that if we've got a student, maybe in an art class, who doesn't have the ability to purchase those supplies, that we make sure they're supplied?
Well, yes, it's part of that comprehensive protocols is to limit the sharing of supplies, is to limit even when you work in small groups. For example, on one day in an elementary, you'll work in a small group, and then 5 minutes later, you'll split to your second group. And we're not going to be able to interchange even the small groups. The guidance that we're getting from our health officials is that when we return to school, students need to limit the sharing of supplies as much as possible.
Exactly.
And limit the number of individuals. So part of the CARES Act money is to help us purchase more supplies so that we have more classroom or individual supplies for students. Or if something is shared, it is shared only in group one and always with group one. So only those same 4 kids always use it. So yes, sir.
One question that popped in my mind, because I know some teachers more than others, but some have an extensive amount of work on Google Classroom, lesson plans, things kids can access if they're not in school. Is that going to integrate in with this new platform we have in some way?
Canvas, it's going to be for some like switching from a PC to an Apple maybe product. But it will be easier for those who are already used to using a platform to just move theirs over to Canvas. And I believe a lot of that is able to be integrated into Canvas or accessed via Canvas. So it actually would be easier for those that are used to using some platform honestly, for those teachers who have somewhat resisted the use of the excellent technology like Google Classroom, it'll be more difficult for them to get started with it than it will be for someone to transition.
And I have one last question, and I hate to throw all these out.
No,
but
you're good.
I thought of this earlier too. So obviously we're going to have these precautions in place, and I would hope that we would strongly suggest that students wear masks instead of just having them available. But my real question is, and I'm sure you have worked through this with Brad and the folks in HR, but if we have a teacher or a staff person, maybe with severe asthma or respiratory problems, maybe they're immunocompromised, and they just don't feel comfortable coming into a classroom, do we have a contingency plan to make sure that we have a place they can go, that they're not in front of kids, that we can take care of those with health concerns, that legitimately just, they don't want to be in with 15 kids or 10 kids while this is going on?
To be transparent, Mr. Mann, we do, without seeing which kids and how many kids opt for virtual, it's hard to say that we can guarantee a spot that it'll match up, one-to-one, or assignments will be available for every person who is uncomfortable or who is unable to because medical conditions. We would love for it to. We've talked about that for months, that, man, this would be great if it matches up perfectly so that our kids, not sure it's going to match up perfectly. Well, what we've done is we've developed our COVID emergency leave protocols that talk about, because of the Family First Act, the federal act that was passed at the beginning of the pandemic, to allow leave for individuals who were either needed to be quarantined, isolated, uncomfortable coming to work. There are some paid leave provisions, though they're limited, and then to 10 days before you have to use your own leave. And then after that, you get into FMLA and things like that. We hope to have an opportunity for those who cannot return, but I can't promise that matches up one for one. And so I do know there's some teachers who are having to make some decisions. They're waiting to see what their assignment may be, if they have access to that assignment. I know we have teachers, I've talked to teachers who are thinking about leave of absence or who are asking about FMLA, and then others who are just wanting to know what precautions we're taking. So cannot guarantee that that's going to match up one-to-one for every teacher to have an assignment that works for them to stay at home if they need to stay at home, Mr. Mann.
May I ask to add into what this conversation is, that I know that we have people, and for the very thing that you just talked about, some people may not disclose. They have tested positive, but they're not going to disclose because they don't have the leave. Are we thinking about those types of scenarios? Are we thinking about the fact that of some place to where that if a person does test positive, that they are required, it's mandatory for them to disclose, to where that it doesn't put others in harm's way? And did I hear you say that we are going to be testing, I'm sorry, not testing, but doing
Checking temperatures.
temperature?
Yes. Yes.
Now, will that be for both adults and for students as they come into the building?
Yes. Daily, we will have temperature checks for staff and students.
And the other issue, as far
and the positive, our director of health, what they produced, our emergency management coordinator and our director of health and director of safety produced a positive or presumptive positive for COVID-19 protocol of like how we handle those items. They work in conjunction with the Oklahoma City Department of Oklahoma City County Health, and I think I totally messed that name up, but our health department, and they work in conjunction with that group to help identify, do trace contacts for individuals who may have come into positive. So obviously there's some HIPAA involved, but there's still obviously some things that we can do to take precautions for individuals who are positive or presumptive positive, making sure we just don't violate their federal or state rights.
I understand that part of it, but then you have, like you said, with HIPAA, but also when you're talking about trace contact, that is the person has to volunteer that information, who they came in contact with or however. But again, it's just like what we're looking at in the medical field of nursing homes, you know, to where that we've had the situations. And the reason I'm asking this, I have gotten this from a staff that said that there has been a positive there, and apparently it wasn't disclosed, and that they are now having to quarantine because of this, and that they did not have that information.
Well, like I said, we're following the guidance of our local and state county health department and our attorney as far as disclosure. One of our concerns is you know how we handle sensitive information once we get it, but how we attain it and the process for that, I would defer to our attorney and our director of health.
And that's what I would like for us to do, to make sure our attorneys and all of that, for the safeties of both, because we do know that there are situations to where even with our president, when he went and he says, I'm going to do this rally, but he had people to sign saying that I'm not going to sue you for if I get COVID. So that's the same as with this, you know, if we don't do something in place and then they sue us because there's nothing in place to protect them as well.
Yes, ma'am. No, we trust me, those conversations happen. Jessica, Ms. Cheryl checks me quite often, or at least asked of you. And when I've forgotten, she reminds me that she needs to review some of our documents. So yes, I will defer to the expertise in those areas, but please know that both of those departments are on top of that.
One more question, as far as with the teachers for virtual learning and for traditional, you know, in classroom, are we doing a selective? Are they able to choose if they're going to do the traditional or if they're going to do virtual? Will there be a required training, if not, you know, for the, especially for the virtual? And so, you know, with the two different kinds.
So one, there are some national standards through a national organization, through Technology Educators, that we feel like our teachers, both virtual and traditional, with this infusion of technology, will need to have some training. And a lot of that's going to take place here in the next several weeks and at the beginning of school. So one of the things I think your question alluded to, when they have a choice, is we want our best teachers always in our best positions. And so we want those who can teach virtually the best to be virtual teachers. And so unlike some employees, again, and I alluded to this when I answered Mr. Mann's question, I can't guarantee that it'll match up one-to-one for someone who happens to want virtual, that they get virtual. At least we know we have that as an option. If their assignment is that they teach remotely or virtual, that's great. It helps us keep some teachers, but can't guarantee that it'll match up one for one, or that everyone who just opts for it will get it. Number one, don't know the numbers, and two, we want the best teachers in the best positions.
And that's my biggest concern, as you all, as the leaders of this, the administration and the leaders of this, is making sure, just as you've said, that we have the best people in place for that.
Yes, ma'am. So that's our next big hurdle. That's our next big step. Now that we have a plan to move forward, it is the getting staffing matched up and getting numbers and verifying how parents, which direction they want to go in, and start building those schedules for both teachers, for both students and staff. Last couple bullet points for me. We're actually on the last few slides. I just want the board to know, as you've listened to or received information from the Oklahoma State Department of Education, several weeks ago, they issued their Return to Learn checklist. We were already well on our way to building our roadmap to readiness. So we took a pause and make sure we incorporated all of their items into our own readiness framework, so that we could give the assurance of this board and our family and community and the state that our district comprehensive plan would include, and does include, all of those items from the State Department of Education as well. Lastly, please know that while the initial work has been done by a series of work groups to get this roadmap to readiness, and we've been working through the months of May and June, July is critical for us. We will need the help of teachers, parents, and support staff to serve as thought partners in reviewing, editing, finalizing. I love the great questions we had here. I know that there are probably 100 to 1,000 more generated by teachers and support staff who work on this on the front lines on a daily basis. We need their input and we need them as thought partners. But as hard as this task is, and as difficult as the pandemic has been, globally, we know that together, for those who are committed to our children, we can do this. We know we must do this. And so despite everything that's happening, you'll see that last slide there. We just know that that we are emboldened and we are determined, staunchly determined, that we will come together as a district, as a community, as a city. And if we do that, we can accomplish this task. And so you see our last words there: together we must rise. And that's what I would leave you with as I stand open for questions as we wrap up the presentation.
Okay, so I'm assuming there's a ton of questions, so let's kind of go organized at it. I'll just start with District 1. Charles, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, District 2.
My computer froze. I had a question.
Okay,
It keeps
come on back to
freezing up.
Mr. Henry. Okay.
So I keep apologizing. Maybe that's maybe some people are happy about that. I don't know. But Mr. Brown, I think one thing that may happen with the pre-K through second grade is that a lot of parents, they want to make sure their kids experience the first day of school, going through that process, getting to know their classmates, but they may have an intention to remove them maybe days or a week later and go to the virtual learning, but just that first day or two, they may want them to experience. Is that an option for some of the parents with pre-K through second, maybe just to take their child to the school, just to get to know the teachers, where they sit and kind of get acclimated for a day or two, but then they want to switch out to a virtual or to whatever the remote, whatever type of learning that's an alternative?
I can't necessarily rule that out, because depending on what type of remote learning we come up with, it may be actually helpful to do that. So I can't necessarily rule that out, but I do think we probably need to wait to decide exactly the details of the pre-K through 2. And then also, parents have a lot of options every single day. Hey, I want this option. I want to change this. I want to move here. And so we would never deny parents of some of their natural rights and options that they may have to choose the best instruction for their child.
Okay, so that they won't be penalized or nothing if they want to bring their child for the first day and say, I want to switch out to whatever this other option is. But I think that's definitely gonna happen with a lot of parents. They're gonna bring their child there for the first day of school, the excitement about it, but then the next day or the next week, they're gonna go to another option. So I want to make sure that those parents feel comfortable knowing that can happen. There won't be any consequences for them in doing that.
Well, I would hope that they would be as transparent with us as possible to let us know, here's our game plan and here's what we would like to do, because we can make a lot of things happen when we kind of know up front. But having to be flexible is one of our guiding principles for this plan. And as far as we know, someone comes to school the first day and then the numbers jump up over the weekend, and that gives them a level of uncomfort and they decide that they want to make some changes. So again, the plan is designed to be flexible. It is easier for us to work with parents and know their plans and us work together, so that there are no surprises on either part.
Thank you, Jason. All right, Rebecca, do you have anything for District 2?
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to all the administration and the staff and Jason and Sean. I mean, the amount of detail that you guys have had to think through on all the scenarios, and especially when things change on a daily basis, is really amazing. And I know there's a lot of questions right now. I've gotten texts, probably 10 texts with questions. I just want to say I appreciate everything you're doing. And I know that you will set up ways that people can get more answers. I know information already went out. My sincere thanks to all of the OKCPS staff for what they've done during this.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, Carrie?
Yeah, I had several questions. So one concern I have is about substitute teachers. Many subs everywhere are retirees, and most districts have a sub problem anyway. What are we doing about that? I mean, because I'm just thinking about, like, if you lose an elementary teacher for 2 weeks who tests positive,
I mean, what does that look like for us?
So I don't know whether this will take up our CFO by surprise, some of the plans that we've made. So either this would be really helpful because I'm saying it to the board first, but the game plan that we had for subs, Carrie, is to, number one, have a training over health and safety protocols that we would pay subs to come to, first of all, and have a true day of orientation so that they know what schools look like in this new post-pandemic world. The second thing is, to be totally honest and give away some of our secrets, we would like to use the CARES Act money to increase the pay for subs for 1 year because we think there's some individuals, because of the number of those unemployed, the number of those who might be looking for work, the number of those, we want someone who cares about kids and who's knowledgeable about it, who can implement our curriculum. But we think by providing a financial incentive and the appropriate training, we can combat our normal typical lack of subs.
Good. And I know some districts have talked about planned virtual days. Like I saw that Tulsa just put out today that they're going to be virtual every Wednesday. And then I've seen other districts that are saying we're going to do like certain number of days throughout the year. Is that something you guys talked about?
We talked about it because of the policy that would allow a virtual day to be counted as a regular day as long as we meet the requirement. We can always, without building into the calendar, declare a virtual day if the need arose because of health reasons or for scheduling reasons. We didn't see that there was a need to purposely inconvenience parents who may have chose the traditional option, to say you chose the traditional option, but on these 5 days, plan for your kid to be at home. Unless we knew and could give a really good reason why virtual instruction needed to take place that day. So because of the change in policy on attendance, we felt like that allowed us to be flexible enough without having to build in the virtual days. So we opted not to do that.
And I hope that you understand that I'm asking these just out of, I want to understand the thought process. I'm not saying anything is right or wrong. I just am curious.
Oh, I just love the fact that
Okay.
we've already thought about it. So that's
So what about professional development for our educators using Canvas? I know that was the one you had mentioned earlier, because we had talked about, lots of PD opportunities we want for our staff. How is that going to look so that they feel comfortable and ready, especially knowing there are some teachers who are way in it online based, and there are some teachers who haven't really started that process yet. What does that PD look like for our educators?
Well, and this is one that I'll give a very, I'll be brief in this one. And if Tracy Skinner wants to jump in to provide some more detail, she's certainly able to do that. But we have Summer Institute that's coming up. We have a week with brand new teachers. We have 4 extra days of PD with all of our returning teachers. Now that PD for the most part is going to center on trauma-informed instruction for pandemic related issues, as well as equity issues and cultural competence issues. But what that allows us to do is, by having those 4 days there, it allows us to then really concentrate on technology for the other PD days. And so Tracy probably could provide a little more detail there. There are also some self-paced PD that comes with Canvas and Edgenuity. And so if Tracy wants to add to that, but we wish we had more days. We wish there was more time before the school year, but we do think we have a good PD plan in order to give our teachers a start on this PD.
I would encourage differentiation in PD. We do it for our kids and sometimes not for our adults.
Very good point.
And then I had a question about students, and you had mentioned it earlier a bit about, we have students who are deaf and we have students who are hard of hearing, and you talked about the face shields versus masks, and I'm thinking about an elementary student who's interacting maybe with teachers who have their special teachers, a cafeteria worker, a secretary, and secondary students who are rotating, that kind of thing. For kids who are deaf and hard of hearing, is it going to be we're going to make sure that all the adults that they come in contact with have a way to communicate with them using a face shield versus a mask. I mean, is that stuff that we're going to provide? And I'm just a little concerned about that.
No, I think I think that has to be an accommodation for students who are hearing impaired, just like the amplification needs to be. And when you use the phrase for every adult that they come in contact with, we need to, for those adults they would casually come in contact with, similar to how we would do overall training for entire staff to make sure they understand that we have students with different needs in the building. We need our staff to know that they may encounter some students that only on occasion, maybe it's a hallway monitor, maybe it's an office person, and they need to be mindful that not every student may be able to hear and may need to rely on their seeing their lips move. And so we need to have some training and accommodations around that, like we would for accommodations for hearing impaired at any time. It just adds a little bit of a twist to it because we typically don't have a situation where we purposely cover our mouths.
Right. But the district will provide those things, right?
Yes, ideally, I wish we could have, I was shooting for a shield for every employee, every adult in the building, and I'm still shooting for that. Problem is we've already bought out a couple companies and all their shields. And so we're hoping to purchase some more, but we are purchasing as many shields as we can get our hands on. Some of that for instructional reasons, because we think that's just a better option for our teachers.
And my last question for now is and Mark kind of asked a little bit about this, and so I'm sorry if I'm asking to explain again, but is there no blended option? Like if you've got a kid who, maybe half the day wants to be in the building and half the day could do online. I mean, wouldn't that benefit all of our kids to reduce the number of children in a classroom? Is there going to be like a blended option like that, or is it only 100% online, only 100% in person?
The online instruction allows us the flexibility to build a schedule, especially considering a middle school or high school student, thinking specifically about a high school student that cannot get their electives through the online course content. So it allows us that flexibility. Again, that was a lot of information to present in the presentation as we get to build schedules, but our high school principals have let us know they prefer to keep their kids as part of a school within a school so that they can build those schedules that way.
Okay, so they will be able to opt in then for certain things for online.
Tracy, do you want to jump in there? Do we think they'll have that option at the very beginning of the school year as they build schedules to have that blended model for virtual?
Yes, that's what we're hoping for. That's what we're planning.
Okay. And just kidding, I forgot I had one more question and then I'm done for real. I appreciate that you guys have been communicating with employees and working to incorporate their feedback, just like Board Member Fields was talking about the people who are doing that on the front lines. Is there a formalized input mechanism for teachers or support staff who have ideas or questions, or, I mean, because you mentioned you want to hear from folks and that you want them to be thought partners. So I guess I would just encourage a formalized input process for people to share those things with you guys and not just sort of, I don't know. That's just a thought.
No, that's exactly where we are now, Carrie.
Awesome.
I do not feel like, even though we've had people to provide great input and we've had good partners, we still need that. So I do appreciate that. That is where we are now.
And I want to echo what Board Member Bud said. You guys have done an incredible job. There's so many things to think about. It is sort of mind-blowing trying to think of all the scenarios. So I appreciate the work that you guys have done and the thought you put into this.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Mark?
Well, Jason, I just want to say thank you to you and your team that have put this together. I feel like we may have gotten a little out in the weeds tonight, drilling you with questions. And at the end of the day, I feel 100% confident that we have a curriculum team, a professional development and training team, and a facilities and public safety people that understand better than we do how to get this done. And I think you put a lot of thought and time into it. It's obvious. And I just want to say excellent plan. And I'm behind you guys 100%. Let's keep up the good work.
Thanks, Mr.
Thank you,
Mayor.
Mark. Ruth, do you have any additional comments?
I'm
Questions?
just like that one on the hamster's wheel. I got to spill mines out as they come. And so I think I've spilled for the most part all of the questions I have. Just one in Mark, who says that, yes, I do trust you guys and all and appreciate all the work that you all have done. But I truly believe that more minds together trying to think through this thing is the best way of doing things. I heard Carrie and others talk about for the hearing or the speech impaired, and that I did hear you talk about it. And I know, like when we go into the stores now, they have a plexiglass shield, and even in front of maybe in the lobby of the secretary. I don't know if you guys have thought about that, having that plexiglass to where that person can take that mask off to where that they are able to communicate, but still being in a protective way. That was just a suggestion, and that's it. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ruth. Meg?
Yeah, I've got just one question, but first, again, just echoing the whole board, you guys have done an incredible job with very limited resources and time. I commend you for your efforts, and I know that a lot of parents and community members feel better knowing that a district like ours has put so much effort into it already. My question is more on the logistics side of things. I know we've partnered, Cox Connect has made some low cost, lower barrier to internet access available. I love that we're moving to a one-to-one model. Are we looking, if everything does shut down again, have we started talks with them or have a plan to make sure that we try and ensure that as many kids that need it can get access to internet at home, so we don't have that barrier for them as well?
Yes, ma'am. The connectivity for us is obviously in this case just as important as devices for that learning at home. Hotspots and a self-reliance on the technology that we could provide is most ideal for us. But as far as our greater community and for working with Cox and Cox Connect, and obviously the state has also really implemented some resources and is working on some things to help us out to give us a wide swath of internet coverage. But for us, if none of those things come through, we're still purchasing hotspots for students that do not have direct connectivity at home. But we're hoping for a wider swath so that we can really double up on coverage and make sure that our families as a whole have access to the internet and access to resources.
Awesome. That's all.
Okay, so that brings us to the end. I do want to say, though, just thanks to Jason for the detail of this work and being patient with all of our questions and answers. Dr. McDaniel, thank you for the update on P2G and anyone who worked on that. And that was a good update to know where we're at. And then just the teachers who grade has been on looking out and seeing people make quick adjustments to doing what would serve kids. So I want to say thank you for that. And then that brings us to adjournment. So